hope you really enjoy more of I know that people see throughout today. Next year will almost certainly be a Westminster election. So today we will be particularly focused on our MP team, and you'll be hearing from them very, very soon. Our opening session is a panel discussion here in the main hall with all our MPs, with the exception of the leader and deputy leader, from whom we will hear just a little bit. We will have the opportunity to tell you that they're working on and what they've achieved in the past. And I think, as chairman of the party, it would be appropriate for me to commend our party leader. Our party leader has tenacious, he stood firm, has laid out to government very, very clearly what our expectations are and what our demands are before the Assembly return. He has very, very courageously presented to the government 7 tests. Those are the bottom line for the return to Stormont. So I say to you, Jeffrey, well done. You have that blend of grit, fortitude, and you've been steadfast, and you haven't deviated, and you haven't fallen for the spin that has been going on, not only by government, but in the media as a whole. And furthermore, I think it's proper that I should mention our 3 members of the policing board, namely Trevor Clark, MLA Joanne Bunting, MLA Morris Bradley, MLA. At a time when our police service are experiencing great difficulties, as a party chairman, I want to thank them for their clear-headedness, leadership, when others were grounded and not sure what they should or shouldn't say. Some of them better stand silent. But our members have done exceptionally well. I warmly congratulate them. All of them, the panel of our members of Parliament, that will of course be chaired by the former BBC Northern Ireland political correspondent, editor Mark Davenport. And that Mark is here, and it's good to see him again. He hasn't gone away, you know. He's still about and did a job, and did a good job here today. All of this panel session, Carol Hopper will address us. Carol has proved to be a ferocious defender of the union throughout her time in elected politics, and is especially known for her dedicated work for her constituents in Upper Bath. She serves a very able member of the Northern, serves as a very able member of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, and we are proud of the work that she has undertaken on the green benches and what it remains from RSC, promoting online safety and safety in the world. All in all, from Carol looking down our conference programme, I should note that in a departure from normal procedure this year, we are going to have a 25-minute break from 10:40 to about 11:05. That will depend slightly on how we're, but I think we're running all right here. And we've decided to build this in to give you more time to visit our exhibitors. I could not overemphasize. This year we have 41 exhibitors. Providing us with you with a fantastic opportunity to access a diverse cross-section of Northern Ireland civil society in one room. So I urge you, please, make a special effort to get there. You can visit the stands at any time of the course, but this morning break has been built into the programme to give you the additional time to meet the exhibitor and get yourself a cup of coffee. In addition to providing an opportunity for you to visit the exhibition stand, this break will also see the launch of an important new book by DUP member, academic, and I have read the book. I got a copy, and someone very kindly sent it to me in the post during the week, so I can stand here and say I have read it, and I'm convinced that you can read it too. Of course, this editing is produced by our good colleague Kieran McQueen. Kieran travels all the way from Dublin every year to be with us, and he's always welcome and always look forward to meeting you. The book is, of course, entitled Orange Markers. The book is a commemoration of the 342 members of the Lord Order who were murdered during troubles. All royalties are being donated to SAFE, that's the Southeast Fermanagh Foundation. The book launch will take place at 10:50 a.m. in the first week and will be addressed by our party leader, the Right Honourable Jackie Dawson, MP, and everybody. Welcome. We will then return and hear from our Deputy Leader, Gavin Robinson, at about 11:10, followed by Emma Littleton Galley, and a panel discussion on policing chaired by Mark Davenport. This will then lead into a high point for our proceedings. The moment we are all waiting for is the leader's speech, and about 12:15. You'll all be here for that. Lunch will then be followed by several policy sessions at 1:45, and I really encourage you to go along and listen to our panel of experts. There will also be an opportunity for your input. We really want to hear your views and opinions. And I'd also encourage you to support our conference charity this year. We mentioned it last year, we were here at the dinner, and it's the Air Ambulance. You know all the fantastic work that the Air Ambulance does.
I know it means going on stage, I'm sorry.
Encourage everybody to get
When
the
he got
announcement.
up, he
Some
twisted
of
the
our
mic
families have
way out.
benefited from the service.
And in this panel discussion, as I get back, I'd love to just tweak it.
In closing, I'd like to express my appreciation to those who are representing the DUP and indeed the Union at this challenging time. I'm glad to see united DUPs on the right side of the argument, standing across for our cause and leading the way. Once again, DUP has been
Jack, you know,
and it is rising to the challenge.
when he went up, he moved the mic. So I'm going to get Oliver to nip up my position so he can mute it. So I'm going to do that funny thing. I've asked him, he's told nothing.
And I also recruit our own staff.
So if you don't
Some brilliant
come up that
staff
side,
worked very, very hard to make yesterday the success. And I trust you'll enjoy the rest of the day. That means I'm finished and others are taking. Have our discussion, the DUP request.
Jack, video set up, okay? Video set up.
One everyone, I'm Sean. I'm the member of Parliament standing election. My portfolios are health, data, and human rights. The focus upon the subject matter outside of those particular deep interest in freedom of information and or belief. We had a first debate in Westminster in 2012, which was the big persecution against the first time ever that debate was heard in Westminster. Off the back of that, Ireland's marriage from the House of Lords and myself started the APPG, all-party parliament freedom of religion and or belief. I chaired that since 2014, and that has grown greatly, always speaking up for those who are subject to human rights and religious persecution across the world. The two of them work hand in hand, and can't divorce one from the other. So today in 2023, the APPG is 118 members. That's members of the House of Commons, MPs, and the House of Lords here. We speak out across the world for those who have been persecuted. For instance, Christians, it's 200 million Christians who live in what is called an endangered neighbourhood. The most persecuted of all the people in the world are Christians in Nigeria, as an example, in Pakistan as well. We speak up for Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan, for the Muslims in India, for the Myanmar Muslims, for the Uyghur Muslims in China, and especially the Jewish nation of the Israelis. We have something that we cannot atrocious violent attack by Hamas terrorists they are. Every week in business questions, I ask a question across the world where persecution takes place. I think that on the Thursday before recess, I asked if there would be what our government, our Christians could do in relation to helping the family or Christians. This happens all the time. It's a job that the Lord is going to do, and our hands for that. and I do that every week. Yes,
Hello and welcome to Inside the DUP. I'm on Democratic. This is an extraordinarily unusual way for me to actually witness the conference, because I'm normally out in the foyer waiting for people to rush out to the stage and be interviewed, or I'm at the back with the cameras. Yeah, it's kind of a novel experience for me. Less of a novel experience for you guys. We were just discussing this, and we think possibly that Sammy Wilson at the end, that you have got the record of those on stage of having been to the most conferences.
That's quite true. I'm still not the oldest.
Do
That's unusual for us to have you up here, because usually we're berating you. We'll do that later today. They'll give you better place to be in.
Well, you've been a parliament since you were a teenager. I mean, you must have also, you must have been Gregory Ride by him.
Yeah. Sammy's older, I think. I got that before he does.
And Ian Biddle, obviously, much younger, completely different generation.
He's in the carry car.
But we go back a long way, because the first time I bumped into you, you had a leather biker jacket on and hair to sort of around here, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think your first week at the BBC in Northern Ireland, that I was a student of that phase. There was a protest taking place, and you were sent off with television
or lower.
We just bumped into each other in the street, and you asked me a question, and you asked me my name.
It's showing up on this as if it's
I
And then
thought you were having me on instead of being paid. I thought this guy is just got straight. I might be new to this beat, but you know, I know it doesn't have long hair and like.
got 10 years.
You did consider a career in journalism, and you came in on the work experience with us. Have you ever thought of an alternative universe whereby you were going down the journalistic road rather than the political road? You know, where might you be?
I figured that maybe it was better than
We are going to talk about some of the issues, the particular subject matter that you've been campaigning on in Westminster, and we'll run through that bit by bit. So I think we should sort of address the elephant in the room to start with, which is there's a perception out there that you guys are quite happy with the position of Stalkers at the moment, because Westminster's still running and you're not necessarily that bothered either about devolution. Is that true or not, Sammy Wilson?
No, it's not. I mean, first of all, most of us have served in the Assembly. Some of us, I would have served as ministers in the executive. The party made a huge sacrifice, of course, to ensure that the Assembly was over the first 4 years of life stumbled from one crisis to another, mainly because Sinn Féin were still not supporting the police and had still not espoused terrorism. We made that happen at St Andrews. And you know, I had the privilege of serving in the Assembly running smoothly. I'm proud of the achievements that the Assembly made at that stage. Don't forget, there are things that are happening today that were initiated by the Assembly. The small business rates relief happened as a result of the work which was done by the Assembly. The help for contractors, bank accounts, project bank accounts was an Assembly initiative which is now taken up by other parts of the United Kingdom. Ownership, which has benefited thousands of young people, was financed initially and heavily by the Assembly. And I could go on with all the achievements. So, I mean, we see the benefits of devolution, where it can respond to local issues and respond quickly. The problem, of course, is at the moment, is that given the way in which things have turned out, the Assembly couldn't function, because you can't have the consensus which is required to make it work. And you know, we worked hard at that consensus while we were the biggest party, and now that consensus is broken down, you can't be preached at for years that the minority nationalist community could not be ignored and then told that suddenly when nationalists become the biggest parties in the assembly, that unions can be ignored. And that's really our issue. Not that we don't want the assembly up and running, but we want the assembly up and running in a way which is sustainable, which respects the unionist community as well. And I think that that's what we have to achieve. Otherwise, you'll just have another crisis in another 6 months or another 9 months, and people will get more and more sick of devolution.
And Gregory Campbell, as we sit now at the conference, how far off do you think a breakthrough is on this score?
Well, truth is that we don't know. We've been pressing the government, waiting on responses. They come back with piecemeal responses, but we need, as Sammy said, we need to have a comprehensive response, because it's in everybody's interest, not just unionism. It's in everybody's interest to have a stable government that's built on cross-community consensus. That's almost a by ball now. Everyone knows that's what's required, but it doesn't seem to be too many people apart from the DUP who are working to try and establish that. And you know, I noticed some sections in the media this week, well, for several weeks now, they've been saying the DUP and the party leader are boxed in, they've no way out, they're in an awkward place. And now the same journalists this week were saying, has Jeffrey Donaldson played a blinder? These are the same journalists who were saying that we were boxed in a week ago and a fortnight ago. So, you know, journalism wants to have it both ways with the DUP. Now, we're determined to see our way through this, and we're determined to try and get it on a solid basis that people can benefit from. And we won't expect to get thanks for doing that, but hopefully we'll get a sustainable future for everybody, not just for our own voters.
In Paisley, you want to see devolution on a solid basis, but what are the prospects as things stand?
Well, I think this is kind of the search for the elusive Scarlet Pimpernel, and this is the huge fissure, the search for the huge fissure within the Democratic Unionist Party. The party does have people with all views and on a range of views in these issues, but we work at this. We have a policy. Our policy is mandated, and we're pursuing a policy line to get devolution, and to get devolution, as both Gregory and Sammy have indicated, on the right terms, that is respectful, but most importantly, that works. Look, what's the motivating factor in all of us? Why do we do this? Because you're right, Mark, we could all probably have a much easier time not doing this. And why do our people follow us? We want to do the best for Northern Ireland. And the best for Northern Ireland is by far the people of Northern Ireland running Northern Ireland effectively, fairly, and with equality. And we want to achieve those things, and I think we can achieve them. But we've got to have a steady nerve, a powerful leader, and we've got to make sure that we get this over the line and we get a result that works for everyone.
Now, we might come back to some of the sort of broader issues before we end the discussion, but I did promise you all that I'd give you a chance to talk about the kind of issues that you've been pursuing. And Paul Gurman, I might actually start with you, because one issue that has been very close to your heart, I know, is the contaminated blood scandal, which saw a large number of people have their lives ruined through contaminated blood, infected with hepatitis and other conditions. This was something personal to you, and you've worked with somebody who you knew very well through the course of addressing that and the inquiry. Tell me about that.
Well, probably better maybe to set the scene. Contaminated blood was blood products that were brought in from the United States, and people who required factor VIII for operations, maybe they were having surgery or whatever, and people who were haemophiliacs required factor VIII because it's required to clot their blood. That factor VIII was contaminated with hepatitis C and HIV at the time, and unfortunately many innocent people caught and were given the contaminated blood, and that affected their whole life. And how it happened that all politics is local, and someone who comes into your office and tells you about their plight that they're going through and the difficulty in their life and how that this has impacted upon them makes it important that you lobby on their behalf. And as a consequence, there was an inquiry set up, and it was chaired by Sir Robert Francis. That inquiry was basically to identify what happened and how many people are affected. 27,500 people were affected with contaminated blood, and as a consequence, a large percentage of those people have passed away and have had no redress whatsoever. It's a major injustice, and has been to the wider community. Unfortunately, compensation is very late in the day in coming through, because so many of these people have passed away and are never going to be compensated. But there's a need to redress, and the report has already got some interim payments to those that are still alive and are living with the condition, and many of whom have developed cancer, liver cancer, and have also had to have liver transplants. And a friend of mine has went through this very process, and as a consequence, it became very close to my heart. So I've been involved in lobbying on this issue, and I think it's vitally important that the government step up to the plate and address the issue. Ken Clarke, who was a minister at the time, attempted to bury this whole subject, and I'm using that word, bury, because that's effectively what has happened. They've buried those that got contaminated. Now, we've been assured that it can't happen any longer because screening processes are in place, but this has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed quickly. That report's coming out in the autumn of this year, so we will be ensuring that proper compensation is not just given to those who got the blood, but to their families. And many of those people have passed on to their family the condition that they have, and many of them have given their partner HIV, which they didn't even know they had, and they got it through this process. So we need to have confidence in our blood supply and ensure that that those who are in our society can benefit from the health system that we do have and not be contaminated. And this scandal needs to be addressed in a proper way.
Carla Lockhart, you've been pursuing a number of particular interests. Particularly, you are interested in the whole issue of pro-life and abortion, and you've been, I think, chairing the group in Parliament, the pro-life parliamentary group. What's that achieved? And obviously, what do you think of what's happened in relation to the reform of the abortion law and the safe spaces legislation, which is the most recent move in relation to this that's just come in here?
Well, obviously, it's a privilege to serve in Westminster and be the party spokesperson on this issue, but this is not a new issue for the party. Our party has always been pro-life, and it always has been a voice for the voiceless. So I'm coming in very much on the back of the work that Sir Geoffrey and the good folks along this line have been doing over many years in Westminster, being a voice for the voiceless. I always say in politics, yes, you have the politics, and yes, you have the policies that your party stand by. But for me, it's very personal, and I really do believe that the most vulnerable in society is the baby in the womb. And it's really important that we continue to be that voice, because they do not have a voice. So for me, it's one of the most important issues to speak out on and speak up on in Westminster. I was honoured to be appointed as the chair of the all-party parliamentary group in Westminster, which covers the whole of the United Kingdom. Very formidable group. I'm sure many in this room will have heard of the MP Fiona Bruce, who has led it for many, many years, and has been co-chaired by Jim and Geoffrey. So I was really honoured to take up the role as chair. Lots of big issues on the life side of things, particularly pills by post. Obviously, that was a change brought in by COVID. And we fought very hard against the government to try and have it removed, that piece of legislation removed, like every other piece of COVID legislation at that time. But unfortunately, the government didn't remove it. We fought a hard battle, but we're continuing to expose the problems that exist by pills by post and the detrimental impact that it's having on ladies' healthcare, because obviously pills by post are supposed to be taken by a certain gestation. And unfortunately, there are very little checks and balances with people taking it at sometimes up to 30 or 35 weeks, which is really very unhealthy for the woman and obviously the baby. So Pills by post, obviously buffer zones, big issue. We've seen in England, obviously, the 2 people who have been arrested for praying silently outside an abortion clinic. For our party, you know, we want freedom of speech and we want freedom of religion, and there's no need for additional laws because the laws around harassment are already in place to deal with that. So it's we've been dealing with that, and also we are very much as a group looking at the science. You know, we always get the science thrown at us in terms of the pro-abortion side of things, but you know, it's now a proven fact that a baby in the womb at 18 weeks or less feels pain. Yet there can be abortion up to birth if they have a disability, or up to 24 weeks if you know, for any other reason. So there's lots of work still to do. We want to see life-affirming laws brought back into our United Kingdom. We want to see, obviously, a repeal to what was forced on the people of Northern Ireland. There was no consultation. It was brought in at a time when obviously the Assembly wasn't sitting. But we all talk about the views of Northern Ireland. I believe we still have a society that values life and believes that the most basic human right is the right to life. So for us, we'll always be a voice for the voiceless, and we will ensure that in every pregnancy, both lives matter. So we'll continue that work earnestly.
Obviously, a lot of strong views on either side of this debate is one of those issues. What would you say to those who maybe within the pro-life community think that the absence of Stormont has actually meant that Westminster's been empowered to push ahead with these legal changes?
I think the problem is at Westminster you have a group of very vociferous, belligerent individuals who are determined right across the United Kingdom to make it one of the most liberal places for abortion. So I'm not certain that even if Stormont had been sitting, that the UK government and the Secretary of State wouldn't have railroaded this in. Because it's the in thing to do and because they think they know better on these things. The reality is that the consultation that was done at the very last leg of the legislation evidenced that over 79% of the respondents were opposed to abortion in Northern Ireland. So we are a life-affirming society. We want life-affirming laws, but we also want to, you know, step up practically as well. We can't say we're life-affirming and we want legislation to protect the baby in the womb. There's a job for us all to do, and that is putting our arms around women and people and families who find themselves in very difficult situations if they fall pregnant. So, you know, I think there's a role for us as politicians to make sure the services are in place for women who find out that their baby maybe has a disability and that they want to keep it. So there's lots to do, and we'll continue the fight.
Jim Shannon, I've left you until last because...
the last shall be first, Mark.
Indeed,
you know, the last shall be first, the first shall be last.
The Speaker does that in the House of Commons as well.
Exactly. We all know that Jim Shannon likes to get in the final moments of parliamentary debates in the evenings at Westminster. So one of the points that you often want to raise is about religious freedom. It's something that's close to your heart, and obviously we see what's been happening in the Middle East, and that's part and parcel of that issue. But you have ranged not just over the Middle East, but also over many other areas of the world in relation to that. Tell me about what you've been campaigning on that regard.
It's maybe always good, Mark, to look back to where this all started. It started in, obviously, when I was elected in 2010. As a Christian, obviously, as others are here as well, I would always wish to be where my Lord wants me to be, and I believe he put me in this position as Westminster MP for Strangford for that purpose. Naomi, who's my PPS, and I discussed the matter and how we would promote that at Westminster and how we would be used for the service to our Lord and Saviour. Very simply, the issue of religious belief became very acute and aware for me early on. This party, Wally McRae was the whip and Nigel Dodds was the leader. We applied for a debate. We got the debate on the persecution of Christians 2012. I don't think it had ever been debated at Westminster until that time. In 2014, just to very quickly run through the catalogue of times, Elizabeth Burridge, Baroness Burridge as she is now, she and I decided to start an APPG as an all-party parliamentary group on freedom of religious belief, religion and or belief. Simply because as a Christian, obviously we're going to speak up for Christians, but we speak up for others across the world as well. And we've done that specifically in the chamber. 2014 started off small beginnings, perhaps maybe 30 members. We now in 2023 have 180 MPs and peers of the House. I chair that APPG, have done since 2014. And the great thing about it, Mark, is it right across the whole political spectrum, we have all the political parties, and that's every political party, individuals as well, who subscribe to that central belief. We can't differentiate, Mark, between human rights and religious belief and persecution, because they both walk hand in hand. And where you see abuse of human rights, you will see abuse of those with religious beliefs. I've been fortunate over the years in that service and highlighting that issue. I've been to Pakistan twice. In 2018, we're back there in February of this year. I would love to be able to tell you that things have improved, but they haven't. That's a fact. So it's really disappointing that the persecution of Christians, of Sikhs, of Hindus in Pakistan is as prevalent, if not worse today than it was in 2018. Been to Nigeria, where it will be the melting pot, I believe, for Africa. It's the biggest country in Africa, population-wise. There's a balance, a very, very small balance between Christians and Muslims. Sharia law has been trying to be imposed upon Christians in Nigeria. Again, an example of where we speak up for that. We've been to, obviously, other countries, been to Jordan, been to Egypt, met President El-Sisi. I was very impressed by him, I have to say, when I met him in 2012. But he confirmed that the right to worship your God as you wish would be enshrined. So all of those things there build the picture. Whether it be the Shias or the Sunnis, the Baha'is in faith in Iran, the gentlest people you'll ever meet in all your life as a Baha'is, persecuted, no jobs, no employment, no property rights. Their graves are desecrated and they're persecuted and put in prison. That's just one example. The Muslims in India, I mean, I'll probably get trolled by the Indian people, supporters, probably shortly after this. But the fact is, in India, if you're a Christian or if you're a Muslim, if you're anything other than a Hindu, your rights will be persecuted right across there. The Myanmar Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims in China, Jehovah's Witnesses in Moscow and Russia, Baptists. I'm a Baptist. There's probably many other Baptists in here. I'm sure of that. Whenever Russia invaded the Donbass, a number of Baptist pastors went missing. They were kidnapped, they were murdered, and they've never been found. So that's a level of persecution across the world. 200 million Christians will live in an endangered neighborhood. That's the fact of persecution across the world. I speak up for every one of those who have a Christian faith, those with other faith, and those with no faith. And I use business questions every Thursday to highlight somewhere in the world where persecution is rife. And I always get a fairly good response from Penny Mordaunt, to be fair, and she always puts it through to the correct minister, to the right person. So massive issue, but not for my glory, but for my Lord and Saviour.
Gregory Campbell, I've got in the notes about what to talk to you about. 3 initials, BBC.
I can't imagine why.
I'm assuming you want to discuss Strictly Come Dancing?
Basil Brush.
That's a possibility, Mark, but possibly later. Yes.
What's your problem with the BBC?
I don't have a problem with the BBC. Sometimes they seem to have a problem with us. And, you know, that's something that they're going to have to adjust to. But let's look at this. I mean, you're getting a flavour of the diversity of the issues that we all raise in Parliament and outside of it. The issue of the BBC is, of course, it's a public sector broadcaster paid for by us all. So it's quite different and quite separate from commercial broadcasters. So you have a position where we're all paying for a service, and up to very recently, it was shrouded in secrecy. I mean, we launched a campaign many years ago to try and ensure that the people that we pay to present programmes, that we find out how much we pay them. And the BBC wouldn't tell us. And we campaigned on that for years. And then they came up with this wonderful idea. What we'll do is we'll release it, but we'll release it in bands. So you can imagine, Mark, what it would be like if you were interviewing me when you worked for the BBC and you said to me, how much do you earn as an MP? And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you. You'd be outraged. And then if I said then, well, I will tell you, and it's somewhere between 50 and 100,000. Can you imagine doing that and getting away with it? But that's what the BBC tried. So they had this huge banding, and some of us said, no, that's not going to work. You're going to have to tell us how much do these people that we pay, how much do they earn? And remember, they're asking us about our expenses, but we're not allowed to know what their expenses are. Totally unacceptable. So they managed to be dragged kicking and screaming into the real world. And then, of course, in recent days, and I'll not go into too much detail because you'll understand why, we've had some of the outrageous and unacceptable behaviour of a very small number of individual journalists who bring shame on the journalistic profession. And I've had to write to the Director General of the BBC, have debates in the House of Commons about a very small number. And I know colleagues, I know Ian wrote to the Culture, Media and Sport Committee about the issue. We're all going to have to keep pressing these issues, that things that happen that shouldn't happen are exposed and dealt with in the same way as they would in any other workforce. So the BBC could be a fine, independent, impartial, journalistic output, and I would like them to be. But the problem is these issues that underlie some of the problems that go on at the BBC, and they have been dragged kicking and screaming into confronting some of them, but we're not there yet. There's much more to come, Mark. I can promise you that.
Mark, there's also the issue, of course, of this enforced payment for a body, which many of us disagree with the kind of political input that there is in it, the bias that there is in it. And in a world where people can now choose to pay for Netflix or Prime TV or whatever, it's an anachronism to say that everybody has to pay for the BBC service. You know, in a free market economy, we should all be allowed to choose how we spend our money. And certainly I resent spending my money and my money being spent on some of the news content and the biased content that we hear from the BBC, where BBC can't even call people terrorists when they're running around beheading babies. I mean, that's the kind of scandal, and that's why many people resent paying the fee, and that will have to move too.
There you are. That needs to get off the fence.
You wouldn't expect me to sit here without a bit of pushback.
As a former employee of the BBC,
as a former
you have to say.
I think there's maybe a perception amongst broadcasters that political parties cheer you on when you're investigating their opponents, but are not so happy when you're investigating them. Is that what's the problem here?
No, it's not the problem, Mark. I mean, I got into some difficulty a few years ago with a certain former colleague of yours because there was all sorts of controversy about that individual then, as there is now. And that presenter said to me, you know, I'm going to keep on digging. And I said to him, well, digging works both ways. Now, when I said that, I was immediately confronted by people online who said, you're threatening these journalists by digging. I said, well, why are they not threatening me if they're saying digging is going to continue? No, you can ask questions and we have to answer them. But the BBC has to answer questions as well as pose them. And they have a problem in being open and transparent. And if they investigate and treat everybody fairly, there isn't a problem. But they seem to have a problem with fairness and impartiality. On some occasions, there are some excellent journalists who work with the BBC and work outside the BBC, but there are some who are not.
I've got this vision of a parallel reality in which Ian continued with his work experience in journalism and you were complaining to the Director General, Ian Paisley.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Let's return to our current reality, because it did promise again that it confronts some of the sort of local issues in areas you've been campaigning on. And I know you wanted to talk about Wrightbus, and I suppose getting into the whole business of the hydrogen economy, and it's a firm that's been through pretty tough times, and yet seems to be in a reasonably positive place at the moment.
Yeah, I think, Mark, it's a real privilege to be a member of Parliament, I think, as Carla said. You have the opportunity to represent a constituency. Obviously, in my case, the best constituency out of all 650 of them. But not only do you have the opportunity to represent a constituency and its people, but also have a helicopter view of what's happening across your patch, across Northern Ireland, and across the whole of the United Kingdom, and to try and be a voice fitting in to the kingdom and what's happening there. And I think as Team Northern Ireland, I think our team does it very well, and Parliament knows about Northern Ireland, knows on every subject that we're just there, not just about the Northern Irish issues, but we're there about all of the issues across the UK, and that's very important to us. Jobs and employment are vital. To make sure that people have healthy opportunities to get into employment, can make a good standard of living, can raise their children, building and being part of that, and helping to be, I suppose, a negotiator in that, or else a facilitator with companies, is very important. A few years ago, Wrightbus was the largest employer, one of the largest employers in Northern Ireland. It had over 2,000 people. It then, unfortunately, had a downturn, and that downturn drove it right to the point where it was left with 49 people and a multi-million-pound debt, and basically a wipeout. And a Chinese corporation was going to buy it over. Now, our experience knows that China was interested in it because not only snuffing out hydrogen technology in Europe, because Wrightbus was at the cutting edge of hydrogen development, but snuffing it out in Europe would mean that we would be reliant upon battery technology in every product, and battery technology is driven by China. And I certainly had that overview. I also had my concern that to see that company fail would be disastrous for my local economy. It'd be the equivalent, losing 1,000 jobs in Northern Ireland would be the equivalent of losing about 20 to 30,000 jobs in the UK. That's the impact. I had the opportunity one night, I was actually at a cinema, and I met this guy called Joe Bamford, and his wife. And I was chatting to them, and he expressed his interest in hydrogen. And about a year and a half later, when Wrightbus hit the buffers, I found his card, telephoned him, and said, "Joe, can I have a conversation with you? I know you're interested in hydrogen. There might be something you're interested in Northern Ireland." And we had 3 cups of tea. And by the 3rd cup of tea, I convinced him to come to Northern Ireland and at least look at the company. And as a result of him doing that, over a period of about 6 weeks, he then moved from being interested to being a prospective buyer, to then being the man who put tens of millions of pounds into buying that company. And within the last 3 years, that company has gone from 49 employees to 1,100 employees, has been in profit every year since, is the largest producer of battery and hydrogen zero-emission buses across the world. Not across Northern, across the world. It produces, it is the only hydrogen public transport system operational in the world. It sells buses to Germany. Imagine that. Selling to one of the best engineering companies in the world. It sells buses to Australia. It's about to do a major deal before COP28 in the Middle East. It is driving technology, and it's at the cutting edge. And it's a British industrialist leading it, which is never going to go to China, is going to stay here in the United Kingdom, is going to continue to provide employment and jobs. And my constituents benefit from that, but about 6 or 7 other local companies across Ulster benefit from it also. So as MPs, we see this stuff every day, and we're facilitators, being able to bring someone like that to the table, connect them with something that's happening in our constituencies. Carla, Sammy, Gregory, Paul, Jim, we do it every single day. It's not always reported on, but the outcome is to help the people out there into employment and to make our country better. Because, as I said in my opening comment to you, we really care about this place. We love it. It's our home. And it's going to be the best place in the world because we're going to make it the best place in the world.
Yeah, well said.
Sammy Wilson was going to talk to you about the economy. I know you want to talk about sort of lasting impacts of the confidence and supply deal, but also just picking up there on what Ian was talking about. You famously was very, very skeptical about man-made causes of global warming. Where do you stand now, and what do you think of what the government's been doing in terms of net zero?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not the only person who's skeptical. The Prime Minister's skeptical now, and has decided that the kind of commitment to reducing carbon dioxide emissions in the economy by 2050, eliminating them or having net zero, is a project which, first of all, is costly. It was reckoned it maybe cost the economy £3 trillion between now and 2050. It's beginning to hit people in their pockets. And people who, it's all presented as all this, as you're going to save the world. Now, given that 97% of the CO2 emissions are produced naturally, 3% are produced by man, 1% of that 3% is produced by the United Kingdom, and China's building power stations, burning coal, and so is India and other countries almost on a daily basis. Our impact on CO2 emissions is going to be fairly insignificant. Yet, we're turning our economies upside down. We're forcing people to buy electric cars, which are expensive. Well, Jim, you could never want to get the speed that you drive at either.
Careful of your accusations.
We're going to force people to put heat pumps into their homes. I mean, we've almost got like a Stalinist economy now to try and drive towards this net zero. We are all paying for it in our electric bills currently. The parts of my constituency are being destroyed by 400-foot windmills on some of the most pristine land that there is. And I think people are beginning to cotton on that actually it's easy to say, let's aim for net zero, but what are the personal consequences for me? Am I going to be allowed to eat less meat? I'm not going to be allowed to fly on my holidays. There's this nonsense going around that you'll be allowed 2 flights in your lifetime. I use that in a week, goodness sake. Now, of course, I am an environmentalist, Mark. I've got to say that to you.
That's questionable.
You've definitely got to scrutinise that.
Now, be careful.
Continue.
I have a wee forest. I'm fortunate enough to own a couple of fields. I have a forest of 2,000 trees, which would absorb the carbon footprint of me for my lifetime. So I'm actually doing a bit for the environment. I feed half the birds in the countryside. I think my garden's Sainsbury's, for goodness sake. And wasps and bees and slugs, everything eats from my garden. So nobody can accuse me of not being. I value that I live in a constituency which has got some of the most beautiful places.
I bet you cut off my constituency.
Habitat for animals, all kinds of insects, birds, etc. In fact, as one of the Navy surveyors who was out with last Friday said that when they go up the coast, it's some of the best bird population that they've seen as they survey the whole of the United Kingdom, the seas around the whole of the United Kingdom. So I'm proud of that, and I want to preserve it. But what I'm not supportive of is this kind of politically driven, and it is politically driven, campaign.
Isn't it meteorologically driven?
Sorry?
Isn't it meteorologically driven? We've seen these extreme weather events going on in the Mediterranean and what happened.
Yes, you can't ignore these things.
Isn't there more and more evidence?
Yeah. You
know,
can't ignore them.
Again, you've got to be careful just how this is reported, especially by the BBC, who seem to be as obsessed as the House of Commons on net zero. I mean, fires in the Mediterranean, when the mayor of Rhodes, one of the towns in Rhodes, said this was not caused by extreme weather. This was caused by people setting fires. That doesn't get reported though. It gets reported in other news channels, but not on the BBC. And we could go into a lot of these other extreme weather events where, yes, there's more damage being caused, but then we've got more people. We're building in places which perhaps in the past we wouldn't have built in, which were always subject to flooding, always subject to hurricanes, whatever. But we see the damage more now because of the increase in population and the fact that we're building in these peripheral areas. But, you know, here's the important thing. That we cannot at a time, and the Prime Minister is now beginning to realise this, we cannot at a time when people are already struggling to make the ends meet, to impose on them additional costs, which the people who make these decisions, who are on good wages and everything else, I mean, it appalls me when I see some of these film stars lecturing us about net zero and need to bring down carbon emissions. And what do? They fly into the conferences to discuss this in their private jets. It's okay for us, but the little man has to bear the burden. And I think that's where we're now getting a kickback in this. And I'm pleased that I've been a member of an all-party parliamentary group in the House of Commons, made up mostly of Conservatives, but some Labour members.
Skeptics, made up of skeptics.
No, we're not skeptics. Yeah. What we are, we're people who...
People don't believe it, you know.
We're people
don't believe it. The ice is melting more than ever did, you know. The forest has disappeared, you know. There's fires over the world, where there's floods, volcanoes, everything's happening. It doesn't happen by accident.
Well, volcanoes, Jim, with all due respect, volcanoes don't start with climate change.
It doesn't happen by accident. That's the point.
I think, Mark,
should I call best of order?
I think what you've done is give everybody in here an insight into our weekly parliamentary party meetings.
Yeah.
And now you'll know why they last so long.
I'd be on one side of the debate and somebody would be on the other.
I thought I was going to expose a split between the devolutionists and the integrationists.
This is a man who drives a 4x4.
Yeah, because I have to.
I drive a motorbike.
I live in a rural community where we don't have the bus service that we usually have, so I need my car. I need my Jeep. Somebody knows that better than anybody else. Yeah.
We're coming towards an end, but I want to keep to the sort of the broader national and international politics. We were discussing actually just before we came up onto the stage, Gregory Keir Starmer, some of his recent comments. I mean, are you looking at what he's saying about border polls now and thinking, oh, we might hang on and get a better deal out of this guy?
Yeah, and one of the things I think that hasn't featured in the media has been, and we can't take all the credit for this, but if I look back at my time in Parliament and Jeffrey's time, I mean, the Labour Party of 20, even 15 years ago was unashamedly a pro-United Ireland party. I'm not saying they're emphatic and strident unionists now, but the Labour Party have moved a considerable way in recent years. So we shouldn't ignore that. And what Keir Starmer is actually saying now is, and we'll take him, you know, at face value, that if there were a border poll, he would be campaigning actively to retain the United Kingdom as the four-body composite part of the United Kingdom. So that's progress. It's a lot better than what it would have been under Jeremy Corbyn or some of his predecessors. So in terms of what he would be likely to do in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll have to see. We shouldn't second guess the outcome of the election. They are certainly favourites. There's no doubt about that. And next Thursday will be the result of two by-elections, and we'll get a better idea of opinion in those two constituencies there. But I think if Keir Starmer is open to having discussions about how to better run Northern Ireland, and I mean, remember, whenever people say about the range of political parties in Westminster, none of them are saying abandon or scrap the Windsor Framework. Remember, at the time of the Anglo-Irish Agreement, nobody said, we're going to do away with this. But you never hear it mentioned now. That's history. It's gone. Even the Belfast Agreement now, we've moved on beyond that. So whether people say they stand by it, they're rigidly behind it, time moves on and events unfold. So let's see what the future brings. We need to keep good relations both with the Conservative Party and with the Labour Party, because who knows what the future will bring. But whoever it is, we need to ensure that we bind the United Kingdom together more strongly with whoever's in government.
I do say, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously we've had the Daily Telegraph ran a story saying that Keir Starmer has been keeping you apprised of his thoughts on relationships with the EU. And then there's another interview that's just in the news this morning with the German finance minister saying that the UK should start talking about maybe extra flexibility in terms of trading relations. I mean, what do you read into all of that?
I must say, I do think that the words of Keir Starmer have made it very, very clear that the myth that we're on the precipice of a united Ireland, that there's going to be a vote on a referendum on the future, Northern Ireland's place in the future of the Union, is a myth. He's burst that bubble, and congratulations to your colleague, Gareth Gordon, for getting those words out of him. I think that is very, very helpful, and I think we can actually, and we need to have, as I said earlier, calm heads at this part. I mean, and that comes from consistent and good leadership, that we know where we're taking Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's going to be remaining in the United Kingdom. The best place for Northern Ireland and for all of its people is to be part of the 5th or 6th largest economy of the world, to go forward from a position of strength and diversity, and to make sure that this economy and this country continues to function. And words from our the big political leaders, that there's not going to be a referendum, that we're not going to upset the constitutional apple cart, are very, very important to keep people in a calm state and focus on the bigger prize. That's a better, peaceful, stable, economically flourishing UK.
We've just got a couple of minutes left, and Sammy Wilson already alluded to it in relation to this controversy about broadcasters and the terminology they use. But does anybody want to chip in on your thoughts on what's been going on in the Middle East? Because obviously it's the dominant story at the moment.
It's utterly tragic. I mean, William's prayer this morning, and you know, you can't not be moved by the scenes that you've seen. And we pray for all the people of the Middle East and of Israel and of all those people. And I really am perplexed by most people at the way Palestinians are being used as human shields by a terrorist organization. I mean, those people's lives are as precious as a Jewish man or woman's life. And, you know, I think we have to care passionately for them. And our country, the dispute in our country is showing that talking is far better. And if we can get people to talk about these things and resolve these things, but I just think there's some people who are beyond it. Some people's hatred is so fanatical. And I think we have to pray for wisdom for that nation and for the United Nations as we come to a conclusion, and for strength and for people to recognize that a retaliatory strike by Israel is legitimate given what they have gone through and what they've witnessed.
And last weekend, Mark, don't forget that the attacks by Hamas, a terrorist organization, upon the Israelis was Israel's 9/11. That's if you take a proportion of those figures of Israelis that were murdered and transfer that to the size of America, it's the worst atrocity in the world. And the slaughter of innocents, the beheading of babies, of women, been raped, people disappeared. Israel has a right to retaliate. I use the words that Hamas should be liquidated, and I mean that. They shouldn't be on this earth at all. They're a terrorist organization. They should be destroyed, and I think Israel has a right to retaliate.
And Mark, I'm afraid I can't let you have the last word, Sammy, because I'm against the clock here. We've only got 10 seconds to wrap this up. So sorry that I didn't get chatting about childcare with you, Carla. I know that's an issue that you've been campaigning on, but we're going to hear from you in a speech in a few moments' time. But would you like to thank the MPs?
No.
I'm Sammy Wilson, MP for East Antrim since 2005 and the party's Treasury spokesperson. That gives me an opportunity to raise a whole range of issues because, of course, most of the policies that the government introduces will involve expenditure and approval by the Treasury. One of the issues which I've been involved in is the whole question of removing CO2 from our atmosphere, what's called the net zero policy. This impacts on everyone. They reckon that the cost to the government will be about 3 trillion. And that will be made up of money which has to be spent by government departments, money which will be taken out of people's pockets by higher electricity bills, and also changing the way in which people can live their lives. For example, moving from diesel cars and petrol cars to electric cars, not having gas boilers in their houses, having heat pumps, and a whole range of issues which, especially in a rural constituency like Northern Ireland, and East Antrim, will be devastating for individuals. I'm pleased to say that working along with other MPs in the House of Commons, raising questions, writing letters, taking part in debates, and of course the by-election in Boris Johnson's old seat proves that the public were actually in line with the point of view which I have, rather than the aim of the government. We have succeeded in persuading the government to drop some of the targets which they have. There's still much work to be done, and that's what I'll continue to do in the rest of this term in Parliament.
Well, conference, isn't it great to be here today? And I understand that there are many watching online as well, so we give you a very warm welcome as well. As I look out over this conference room, it makes me immensely proud to stand before some of Ulster's finest, many of whom have supported our party for decades. It's also great to see many new faces who are now putting their shoulder to the wheel. Many in this great gathering will have had a similar life experience as me. Politics is in your blood. You were born and raised knowing what you were about. You do what you do for the cause, for the union, and for the love of this wee place we call home. In truth, we do it because we want to leave this place on a secure and solid foundation for our children, grandchildren, and future generations. There's lots written about the DUP by people who know very little about us. But this conference is a sign that there is a unity of purpose, a strong, resolute determination to stand up for all our people and deliver a better Northern Ireland for all. This party has never shirked away from the big decisions. Indeed, it was this party that delivered stable government in Northern Ireland for over 10 years. We ensured that Sinn Féin signed up to policing and the rule of law when others thought it was impossible. We know when not to blink. And the message from this conference today to His Majesty's government is that this party is still as steely as ever. It has as much grit and determination as it did back then, and it's certainly not for turning. We will hold out until we get what the people and businesses of Northern Ireland deserve. Our stance has not always been popular, especially amongst the chattering classes, but we stick to our principles because it's the right thing to do. I believe we owe our intrinsic values, our ethics, to our founders, Dr. Paisley and Peter Robinson. Doc led with courage, and Peter strategized like no other. And in doing so, they laid the foundation for this party, and that foundation is still rock solid. The term Paisleyite was used by some as a term of derision, but you know, I still wear it with pride. I grew up in a Paisleyite family. For us, it meant standing firmly by your beliefs and doing your best for the ordinary man or woman, regardless of colour, class, or creed. And that's good advice for any of us in this room who are privileged to hold elected office and bear the burden of public representation. Do what's right and do your best for everyone. Most importantly, connect with people, engage with them. Stopping even for that brief chat allows you to have your finger on the pulse as to where the community are really at. We don't live in a political bubble. We don't talk in echo chambers. This party is about real people and doing right by them. In conferences, I speak to elected representatives. I also speak to our grassroots supporters. You are the backbone of this party. You are the powerhouse, and it's time for us all to get out and take the message to every hill and dale that the DUP politically is the first and last line of defence in this great battle for Northern Ireland's continued place within our precious union. The DUP is the only political show in town. Mr. Chairman, our first task is to get things right on the Windsor framework, because folks, nationalists would never have accepted the sort of arrangements north-south that we have had to accept east-west. Of course, the rigorous implementers in the Alliance Party would accept anything and told us the protocol was on tablets of stone and was unamendable. Well, we proved them wrong. But folks, we have much more work to do. And on this, I have every confidence in our leadership team of Sir Geoffrey and Gavin, that they will do the right thing by the Union and do what is right for Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom. Geoffrey and Gavin, we know the pressure others are trying to put on you, but I know I speak for everyone in this room in saying we are standing with you and you have our full and unwavering support. But make no mistake about it, Conference, every one of us have a role to play. It will not be nationalists who defeat DUP candidates at the next election. It will be unionists who sit at home and don't bother to vote or waste their vote on candidates who genuinely can't win. While some get carried away with the nationalist vote, let's remember the combined Sinn Féin and SDLP vote in 1998 was about 40%, and it's still around 40% in 2023. Mr. Chairman, as the undisputed voice of unionism, this party has a duty to chart a course ahead which builds a broad coalition of support for the people who want to make Northern Ireland work, a movement who share our ambitions for this wee province. By doing so, we deliver the Northern Ireland I want for my family and for yours, and what a prize that is. However, we need to energise and unite the unionist family. For as we've seen in recent elections, divisions and infighting is costing unionism votes, costing unionism seats, and costing unionism influence. There is nothing more frustrating or demoralising than standing outside a polling station in a supposed unionist loyalist area and seeing drips and drabs of voters entering the polling station. Despite the hard work that this party puts into serving and delivering for our communities, and we do deliver for our communities, not enough people feel exercised to vote. Delegates, we need to ask why this is, and I believe the root of the problem is the ongoing, damaging and destructive divisions within unionism. Divided unionism demoralises our people who want to see cooperation and who crave unity, and as a result, they are staying at home. They are fed up, as I am, of the intra-unionist infighting and attacks. Is there anything more pointless than Red Dempsey's latest diatribe against this party? And let's just say, I think he's like a broken record. Faced with a constitutional enemy that is coalescing around Sinn Féin, the message from grassroots unionism is clear. Work together and get our voters out. Mr. Chairman, this is the challenge that this party must embrace. and indeed we must succeed, for the cost of failure is too great. Apathy and divided unionism helped Sinn Féin to become the largest party in Stormont. Apathy and divided unionism helped Sinn Féin become the largest party in local government. Conference, we simply cannot allow apathy and divided unionism to aid Sinn Féin or their wee helpers in the alliance in the forthcoming Westminster election. It's too important. More absentee Sinn Féin MPs who take the expenses but not their seats, and more Stephen Farries, please no. Friends, we have talked about unionist cooperation for long enough. Further delay is simply unacceptable. We do not have the luxury of time. My message to other unionist leaders, of whom I have the greatest respect, is clear. Doug, Jim, please work with us to deliver what our people want. The DUP are the party that can, at Westminster, ensure the Shinnerbots are given the reality check they need. The reward will be more seats for unionism, and more influence for unionism, and more for Northern Ireland. The journey will not be easy, but when I look out at the support in this room, I am confident that no matter what opponents throw at us, no matter how hard the Secretary of State tries to bully and cajole us, we will stay the course. We will hold the line. Conference, the time is now to rise up. Northern Ireland is at a crossroad. The decisions taken in the coming days will determine the direction of Northern Ireland for future generations. The time for unionism to stand together is now. The time for unionism to speak with one voice is now. The prize is a Northern Ireland secure and more prosperous within this great United Kingdom. So let's grasp that opportunity. And when history of this period is written, let it be recorded that when the Union was tested, this party was not found wanting. Together, we will overcome. Together, we will endure. And together, we will succeed. Thank you.
It was a cold and frosty day that morning when I woke up. I got ready to drive to college, just like every other day. I was approaching a busy junction, so I started to brake. However, the car didn't stop and slid out onto the road. I turned and saw the lorry coming towards me, and that's when it all went black. My injuries were so severe, the air ambulance team were tasked. They were with me quickly and they treated me at the scene. I was trapped in the car and I couldn't see as I had glass in my eyes. I had to be cut from the wreckage, but the firemen and ambulance crew were so reassuring and put me at ease a little. I didn't know at the time, but I had a fracture to the back of my skull. I had a small brain bleed, I fractured my pelvis, and I broke my wrist in 4 places, and I was highly traumatised.
One of the most common causes that we go to are road traffic collisions. The interventions that the HEMS team can provide include advanced analgesia, sedation. They can perform pre-hospital surgery and pre-hospital anaesthetics. This tends to be for the most critically ill or injured patient.
The recovery process was long, and I'm still not completely myself. During this, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, most likely caused by the head trauma from the accident. Having seen the state that my car was in, I'm extremely lucky to be here today. Thankfully, there were no real scars, I was in a neck brace for almost 6 months, and this was removed on my 21st birthday, and it was the best present I could have ever received. I am now a volunteer for the charity, and I encourage you to support in any way that you can. Without the air ambulance, I wouldn't be here today, and I will be forever grateful for everything they have done.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going for our break, and just following on from the presentation that we had, there will be buckets at the door, so if you can give, please give generously, but they'll be there for the most part of the day, and we'll see you back here in 25 minutes. Enjoy. Thank you.
I am Paul Girvan, Member of Parliament for South Antrim. I've had the pleasure of representing this constituency since 2017, and I'm the party spokesperson on transport issues at Westminster. During my time in Parliament, I've had the opportunity to sit on a number of committees, including the International Trade Committee. As a DUP member of that committee, I have fought for businesses in Northern Ireland to enjoy the same benefits as those of our counterparts in the rest of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is a global leader in areas including new energy technology. Along with my colleagues, I have lobbied ministers to make Northern Ireland a hydrogen hub. The cost of living crisis has shown how important it is for the UK to become less dependent upon imported energy. In this way, Northern Ireland can play a key role in this vital sector. We are determined to ensure that we benefit from the levelling up agenda across all UK regions. I will continue to do all I can to work for local businesses and make sure their voice is heard at Westminster.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, can we just ask everyone to take their seats? And if we could have the door closed. I know there's people standing in the door, but we need that door closed because there's a bit of noise and commotion emanates from it. Our next speaker is someone who doesn't really need to be introduced, but I want to do it anyway. He's our Deputy Leader, Gavin Robinson, and it's a delight for me to welcome Gavin Robinson MP onto the platform. Gavin has been proved conclusively he's one of the most effective voices at Westminster, and he has been a vocal, most recently in highlighting our concerns with the Barnett formula and our representatives on the Select Defence Committee. He has been supportive of the UK position on the Ukraine war and worked to encourage a resurgence in the shipbuilding industry at Harland and Wolff in East Belfast. That's his own constituency, which he serves exceptionally well. Mindful of all that, it is no surprise that Gavin was elected our new Deputy Leader, as I've said, just in June. This is therefore his first conference appearance in that position. And in inviting Gavin to speak, I'd like to congratulate him once again on his election. There's one thing that Gavin hasn't got, and maybe it's me, he says I haven't got, but the one thing that Gavin didn't forget to do, he certainly didn't forget to grow, and you'll see that. So Gavin, would you come and address the conference, and we're all looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Is he about? Gavin Robinson MP. Thank you, Gavin. Well done. Where is he?
I didn't pick the music. Mr. Chairman, Party Leader, friends all, thank you for such a warm welcome. It's a huge honour to address our conference this morning. We gather at a time when all eyes are upon us, with battles behind us, challenges before us, and an unrivaled resolve between us. Our party was founded on the core principle of doing what is right for Northern Ireland. For over 50 years, we have stood strong and firm, knowing how and when to advance. Knowing that the principles that unite us, underpin our philosophy, and drive us forward don't change with the seasons or blow with the wind. Our solid foundations stand the test of time. Today, as Deputy Leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, I want to put on record, I want to honour and put on record the foundation stones that have been laid before me. For 28 years, Peter Robinson, my mentor and friend, served in this role. Yes, he went on to lead our party and our country and is rightly credited with some of our greatest success. But for almost 3 decades, he invested in building our party, developing our purpose, and galvanizing our people. As leader, Peter drew upon the steadfast, loyal, and dedicated support of Nigel Dodds. Serving as deputy leader for over a decade, Nigel's commitment to our country, our party, and our cause has never diminished. Thank you, Nigel. And more latterly, Paula Bradley took up the reins. Despite trying times for Paula personally, through her leadership, she served to demonstrate a sense of humanity and genuine connection between our party and our people. All three put party and cause before person. All three were and are driven by our collective desire to build on our solid foundations, and all three led the path upon which I now tread. Conference, my commitment to you, to Jeffrey and to the wider party, is to build on that legacy. Since my election, I've had the privilege of joining with many of our associations and branches, as well as supporting colleagues across the province at events. And through those engagements, I recognise now, more than ever, that through leading, we serve. Jeffrey and I lead as servants of all of our members. Our MPs, our peers, our MLAs, councillors and party members, we are your servants. And the DUP leads as servants of the people. We lead to protect our place in this United Kingdom. And in doing so, we lead to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland, and at challenging times, we lead to resolve the impediments that hold us back. In each of those tasks, one thing we don't lack is people trying to give us their advice. We're surrounded by opponents and commentators that don't share our concerns, who don't wish to understand the consequence of their constant dismissal, and who demean the process of getting back to the balance that makes Northern Ireland work. We hear them all the time, don't we? They decry the lack of progress while simultaneously scoffing at the obvious solutions. Reduce the friction on trade, resolve the democratic deficit, and repair the constitutional harm. 3 key concepts articulated in detail as essential to unlocking progress, yet we have to suffer through the missives of their expert analysis, conspiracy theorists, and perpetual naysayers. Yeah, we hear about the need for courtesy in our public discourse. But how often have you heard a colleague described as a big beast, like we inhabit some far-flung safari? Or worse still, others sneeringly dismissing our colleagues as a liberal. For liberal, of course, they mean weak. And conference, they need to know there is nothing weak about our unionism. Northern Ireland has flourished and will continue to flourish within the United Kingdom. Our union is strengthened by its difference, its complementary contrasts, and our comfort toward them. Our ability to shape our place within the United Kingdom amongst ourselves here in Northern Ireland is a strength. And be in no doubt that those who jump on every passing bandwagon to self-defeatingly dismiss the concept of devolved government do our cause no favours at all. In the face of deep opposition, we rightly highlighted the flaws of the Northern Ireland Protocol. We voted against it in Parliament and we warned of its pitfalls. And we faced the pious platitudes from the rigorous implementers and were told the protocol is here to stay. They decreed there would be no change. For them, majoritarianism never worked in Northern Ireland and could never work in Northern Ireland until, of course, they felt they were in a majority. Conference it shouldn't have taken. Our withdrawal from the executive to shift the dial. But imagine our surprise that as soon as the Windsor Framework was published, the rigorous implementers were quick to spin the same disc again. Without a blush, they decreed it had all been resolved. There's nothing to see here, and it won't change anyway. So that's your lot. Well, not quite. We're earnestly engaged in squaring the circle, and I have no doubt that Sir Geoffrey will have more to say on that later. But one thing, Conference, is clear. Impetuous impatience will not eradicate the issues. Having smashed dynamic alignment and affirming our willingness to deliver together, we will get this right. You may have noticed that in April, the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement provided ample opportunity for the great and the good to attack our position. Though I'm sure you noticed that there are at least two things missing from their revisionism. Firstly, throughout those 25 years, it was the failure to deal with difficult issues that meant the doors to Parliament buildings were closed for 40% of the time. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, I didn't hear them once acknowledge that the most successful and sustained period of government in Northern Ireland was when we led the government from 2007 until 2017. We are of our community. We reflect their desire to get the job done, and we will deliver. The future conference is far too important to squander the opportunity to get the fundamentals right. And in securing the firm foundations for political stability, we must also champion financial stability of Northern Ireland. Without one, the other will falter. There is no prospect of successful government if the only future an executive can offer is one of service withdrawal and cuts. There's an unquestioned case for reform, but that doesn't mean that we can ignore the here and now. When I started championing the case for the reappraisal of how Northern Ireland is funded, I was a voice in the wilderness. Despite the clear and concise work of the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council, too many sought to pillory the calls as a diversion or a distraction. But these are the facts. Northern Ireland gets less than it needs. Not wants, desires, craves what it needs. Materially, that means less money for schools, hospitals, and roads. No flexibility to tackle waiting lists, increase special needs provision, or provide effective and meaningful support for childcare for our hard-working families. Last year, our government departments received £322 million less. This year, it's 431 million, and next year, it's 458. Year on year, the problem compounds. Year on year, the ability to deliver is crippled. And only this week, the Department of Finance talked about inflationary rises, putting the new level of pressure at £2.3 billion. As financial scope recedes, that means we don't have the ability to pay public sector workers properly or in keeping with their Great Britain counterparts. And the response from the Secretary of State? Nothing. Which, in fairness, is much more constructive than the response from his junior minister, Steve Baker. The erstwhile self-confessed agitator, the 12-hour candidate for Prime Minister, would be better back in the box he confessed to being released from at the start of the summer. The one-time Spartan who threatened to seize power is now the unparalleled Private Pike of Northern Ireland politics. But whether he gets it or not, the need for fiscal reform remains. If we want a government that is in the right position to deliver for our people, it needs financial firepower. As it stands, Treasury are now punishing Northern Ireland for their underfunding. There should be no surprise that last year's funding led to a corresponding overspend. And yet they expect us to do more this year, with even less, whilst at the same time pay back their own shortfalls from the previous year. They are actively hampering the positive impact government should have, and frustratingly, there now appears to be some naive, superficial view that the bung of $1 billion would help. It wouldn't even cover last year's shortfall, the obvious gap this year, and honour those who honour us in the public sector with their pay award. Structurally, conference, a change is required, and simplistically, without it, devolved government will be unable to function. But having sorted the fundamentals, we must continue to strengthen the bonds. The relationship in any union cannot be one way. Yes, it's easy to talk about our historical contribution to the United Kingdom and indeed the world, but it need not be historical. Shipbuilding, ropeworks, linen, and aircraft manufacturing all easily trip off the tongue, just as the inventions of Massey Ferguson, Dunlop's pneumatic tire, Professor Pantridge's mobile defibrillator, and yes, even Hans Sloane's chocolate. But today, financial services in Belfast see $600 billion of transactions clearing our city of Belfast every day. 1/3 of all aircraft seats are manufactured here in Northern Ireland. Spirit Aerospace in my constituency now connects our innovative aircraft expertise into a burgeoning global market. And shipbuilding conference, I'm delighted to say that a renewed Harlan Wolff is rising once again. Those success stories draw upon our skill and our ability, but importantly, our place within the United Kingdom. Harlan Wolff is but one example of a local company now benefiting significantly from Ministry of Defence contracts, strengthening our place and purpose in the UK. £1.6 billion to reinforce and renew a key component of our maritime defence, being built here in Belfast. I'll make a speech another time about how Northern Ireland draws just 1/5 of the UK average on defence spend. But our contribution is much more than industrial. Take Thales, for example. Their ability to provide the practical means for Ukraine to defend herself during the early part of Russia's invasion was critical. At a time when the international community was considering how best to support Ukraine, NLAWS provided the main defensive bulwark against the outrageous incursion into Ukraine's sovereign territory. Colleagues, I was in Odessa the day more rockets landed than any other. I saw at firsthand the resilience of their people and left with an ingrained appreciation of their desire to regain the territorial integrity of their country. From a national perspective, our party proudly played a supportive role for Ukraine. We have not been and will not be found wanting on the defence of their sovereignty. Conference, we did not bow down to terrorism on this side of Europe, and will not bow down to international terrorism on the other side either. It should be no surprise that the only members of Parliament from Northern Ireland to be personally sanctioned by Russia are DUP MPs. Sammy, Gregory, Paul, Jim and I are proud of the stance that we have taken, and we will continue undeterred. And colleagues, we stand with Israel. No equivocation, no nuance. We believe Israel has the right to defend her borders. We believe in Israel's right to exist, free from terrorism, free from genocide, and free from the brutality that we witnessed last week. We pray for the restoration of peace, and we will continue to call out those who preach human rights, yet seemingly struggle to condemn slaughter, rape, and torture just because the victim wears a Star of David. Faith should have no bearing on the principles of peace and justice, democracy, and the rule of law. Those are principles worth defending, and to that end, our party proudly stands up for our armed forces at home and abroad. As Northern Ireland's only member of the Defence Select Committee, I'm proud that we as a party secured a UK-wide duty on the Armed Forces Covenant. No longer can a Northern Ireland minister respond through pure sectarianism to say that the Armed Forces Covenant doesn't apply here. It should. And as a direct result of our party efforts, conference, it does. I'm delighted that our party now has a renewed team of armed forces champions across the councils of Northern Ireland. And I'm assured of their willingness to highlight, support and promote our brave service personnel and veterans across Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's contribution to the defence of our realm remains significantly higher than our population. And just as servicemen and women from across this province honour us, so too we must honour them. And it doesn't stop there. Across a whole host of sectors, we both benefit from and contribute to the greater sum of our parts. In sport, music, industry, academia, politics, film and the arts, you will see and hear Northern Ireland's influence. It doesn't take long moving around London to know that our wee country is a significant part of our big country. Families spread throughout the length and the breadth of the United Kingdom. Jobs deployed throughout the United Kingdom. Holidays enjoyed throughout the United Kingdom. Networks linked throughout the United Kingdom. And memories made throughout the United Kingdom. We are you. You are us. And together we benefit from one another. Conference, as we lead for unionism, we should never lose sight of our ultimate aim. In cherishing what we inherit, is it our responsibility to build a better, stronger Northern Ireland and in turn a better, stronger United Kingdom. As any Game of Thrones fans will know, winter is coming. But let's never forget that spring isn't too far behind. With a renewed sense of determined optimism, I know, conference, that together we can succeed. Thank you.
I'm Gregory Campbell. I've been the Member of Parliament for East Londonderry since 2001. In that time, I've raised a range of issues, both inside Parliament and out, one of which is the importance of public sector broadcasting. As we all know, the broadcasting media is very important. It can raise issues, it can highlight problems, it can also cause problems if it isn't done correctly. It needs to be done impartially, independently, and it needs to be factually accurate. On some occasions, public sector broadcasters, particularly the BBC, can fall foul of those very important criteria. So I have raised that in Parliament. I've had debates in Westminster Hall. I've raised the issue of highly paid broadcasters on the floor of the House as well, and the need for all of us to be very much aware of the fact that we pay for these broadcasters, we pay for them to be impartial, we pay for them to be accurate. And while they need to hold politicians to account, we also need to ensure that we hold people like BBC broadcasters to account as well. And we in the DUP have done that for many years. We intend to keep doing that. And one of the reasons we do is because if we didn't, who else would?
Well, well done, Gavin, and that was an excellent speech, and we're going to hear something more now. I'm delighted, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Emma Little-Pengelly to the stage. Emma has served both as an MLA and Member of Parliament for South Belfast. She joined the Northern Ireland Assembly team last year, representing Lagan Valley, and Emma holds the Executive Office, Legacy and Human Rights portfolio. We very much look forward to hearing what Emma has to say. And following on from Emma, we have a discussion which we are again delighted has been chaired for us by the former BBC NI political editor, Mark Davenport. Restoring Fairness in Policing, it's entitled. This will feature Stephen Murray, Dr. Johnny Byrne, Joanne Bunting, MLA, Trevor Clark, MLA, and Maurice Bradley, MLA. And again, I commend our policing board members on the job they've been doing. Policing is seldom a subject out of the news in Northern Ireland, but by the last month has been fairly exceptional, even by our standards, for reasons that we are all very well aware of, and which I'm not going to make any comment on. The discussion will therefore be particularly timely. So right now, let's welcome Emma Little-Pengelly. Emma, thank you.
Thank you, Party Chairman. We gather here today with friends, family and colleagues. But we know all too well that today there are many, many hundreds that mourn. There is weeping in the homes and in the streets of Israel. There are empty chairs around many tables. Mothers, fathers, children. The scourge of terrorism has inflicted its pain and horror once again. Party Chairman, colleagues and friends, I know I speak for all of you when I say our hearts and prayers go out to all who have lost loved ones. Sadly, we live in a world where human life is all too often treated as expendable. Each life, just another pawn in the violent politics of another. We live in a world where evil is celebrated on the streets, where terrorism and murder are glorified, where right is wrong. To the terrorist, no action is unacceptable, no act too inhumane. They care nothing for the established ethics of war. Their war crimes are to be disregarded and ignored while they shout about their rights to all who will listen. To the terrorist, the only rights that matter are theirs. Conference, we know this story all too well. For the horror of terrorism visited on the people, the homes and the towns of this place. So many here bear the scars of the grubby, brutal terrorist campaigns of years gone by. There are empty chairs at too many tables across our province, and I know that that loss is still mourned. Conference, terrorism is always wrong. It was wrong then, and it is wrong today. This party has always stood strong against the evils of terrorism, and we will continue to do so. It is only by facing this down, by standing strong for what is right, by defending what is good, that the battle will be won. On this day, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the victims of terrorism in Israel. We are not fence-sitters. We are not weak and watery on this issue like some. Where the Alliance Party can't make up their minds either way, we can be clear. We stand with you, Israel, in your pain and in your right to protect your citizens. It comes as no surprise to any of us to see representative after representative of Sinn Féin tweet out their support for Palestine on the very day of these appalling terrorist attacks. Some said that the masks slipped. Well, it didn't need to slip very far. Shameful from the shameless. But we know that the headlines will disappear. And as we know, the pain and loss will endure. And when the airwaves fall silent, when the world is not watching, it is what is done to those who have suffered such unimaginable loss that will count. I have had the privilege and responsibility of working on legacy for the DUP for almost 15 years now. And in 2007, we gave a commitment. We promised to put victims and survivors at the heart of what we do. And we have delivered significant improvements, more than tripling the funding available to support victims, survivors and groups. We introduced a fully funded Victims Commission and Commissioner's Office. We established a comprehensive needs assessment to identify need, the creation of the Victims Forum, the establishment of the Victim Service, distributing funding on a range of schemes. We supported the pension for severely disabled victims, but importantly, achieving criteria which excluded perpetrators and getting that passed through Westminster. But regardless of what has been achieved in the past, there is more yet to do. Those who are bereaved deserve additional support. The payments made at the time were woefully inadequate. The loss and suffering of innocent victims must be acknowledged and addressed. And to that end, the DUP is actively engaging with the Commissioner for Victims and Survivors on potential proposals. But for 25 years, at the heart of legacy has been the greatest hurt of all. Justice denied to the many thousands killed and injured by terrorism. What started with the repugnant release of terrorists from prison has ended with the government's abhorrent amnesty. Too few have ever served a day behind bars, even for the most heinous of crimes. Innocent victims have paid the highest price, a heavy price, yet they have been on the wrong side of compromise after compromise. Conference, that is why we opposed the government's legacy legislation. While it is right that the government address the witch hunt against those who served, this was not the way to achieve that. To remove any real possibility of justice from the many, many innocent victims of terrorism through this legislation is simply wrong. It is an affront to justice. But make no mistake, Conference, the hypocrisy of others on this issue is galling. Sinn Féin were happy with amnesty, as long as it applied only to them and their erstwhile colleagues. They rejoiced in the early release of prisoners facilitated by the Belfast Agreement. They embraced the on-the-run letters, hiding their grubby backroom deal from sight. And the Irish government too has also displayed breathtaking arrogance. It is fast out of the blocks to lambast the UK for its approach, yet victims are crying out for Dublin to investigate claims of Garda collusion. Leo Varadkar might have one eye on the polls. However, any desire to seduce would-be Sinn Féin voters should not trump the moral duty to victims and survivors on both sides of the border. Victims must be valued more than votes. But Conference, it is time for vigilance. For what we are now witnessing is the next stage of the campaign, that of lawfare, of narrative setting, and of the rewriting of history. What we are now seeing are the twisted, sleeked words to bend and spin the truth, to justify the terrorist and besmirch the name and record of those who stepped up and stepped forward through duty and honour. We will not allow that to happen. We will not allow those who did evil to write the narrative of the past. We will speak truth to their lies. We will defend the reputation of those who put their lives on the line in the defence of others. No greater love hath any man or woman, Conference. And while the terrorist hid in the shadows to do harm, it was the brave men and women of the security forces that stood in the light to protect. They put themselves in the line of danger, not through compulsion, but because of their sense of duty and service. Conference, we will always honour the proud record of those who served. We will remember their sacrifice. It was this party that led the way for the battle for the Armed Forces Covenant to be recognised in Northern Ireland. It was the DUP that proposed and secured a Veterans Commissioner post for Northern Ireland. And our local councillors have stepped up to serve as veterans champions. 10 of those 11 posts are held by councillors from this party. Conference, let us take a moment to recognise the service of the Greenfinches. 50 years this year from their creation, we remember them with pride. But in particular, we remember the 4 women killed. Eve Martin in 1974, Jean Liggett in 1976, Anne Hurst in 1977, and Heather Kerrigan in 1984. Conference, it is their sacrifice that should shape Northern Ireland's future, just as it has shaped our past. To each and every person who served with honour, let us send a clear message. We are proud of you. But moving forward, we face a huge challenge. It is one that we will not shy away from. It now falls on all of us to build the future of this place we love and call home. It is now our duty to find new solutions to old problems, to build a prosperous, thriving place for everyone throughout Northern Ireland. That will require difficult decisions. It will demand new ideas. The task of building for the future must be based on the lessons of the past, remembering the legacy by establishing shared principles of the value of human life, of what is right and decent, supporting aspiration to achieve the right and ability to provide for your family and community, to live life free from the struggle of poverty or pain and the barriers that hold people back. It is each of us that will shape what is to come. Conference, our future is not that of crusty old Republicans singing songs of war. Our future is not the drugs and the criminals that drag our communities down. Our future is not the struggle to get healthcare when you need it, the struggle to get the right support for your child, or the struggle to buy a house. Our future must work for everyone. Excellent public services, peace on our streets, thriving families and communities, fulfilling aspirations within a strong Northern Ireland and United Kingdom. The power is in our hands to make this happen. Conference, we are the party that believes most passionately in making Northern Ireland work. It is right for us to fight for the best possible outcomes because we want to build the strongest foundations. A house built on sand will not last. That is why we must get this right. Together, we can lay the firmest foundations for the next 100 years. Together, we can change the tide and build a stronger, brighter, fairer Northern Ireland. Conference, together with your support, we will succeed. Thank you.
My name is Ian Paisley. I'm a Member of Parliament for North Antrim. I believe it's the most beautiful constituency in Northern Ireland, but I would say that, wouldn't I? What I pride myself in doing for my constituents, I think it's service delivery on the ground, providing an active political service for them that makes real changes and brings real benefit to their lives. In Parliament, the activity that I could be engaged in is, I suppose, being a voice for people there, trying to help my constituents in terms of speaking out for them, speaking up to them. But the most vulnerable and the most needy are people that I really am passionate about supporting. Last year, I was so keen to and so delighted to be asked to be the co-sponsor of the Down Syndrome Bill, which is now the Down Syndrome Act. And this is about making sure that kids who are born with Down syndrome, and there's a prevalence of them in Northern Ireland, that their rights are acknowledged throughout all of their lives into adulthood, and that they get support, are entitled to access to support. And I was very pleased to be a co-sponsor of that bill and to see a change in our law and to see my name on that law. And other actions to help people get access to rare drugs and other supporting packages are all very much part and parcel of that campaign.
Hello everyone again. Now we're moving from Westminster and the fairly feisty debate that we had there between the party's MPs to another topic which is always sensitive and controversial, but no more so than now, policing in Northern Ireland, which has of course just been hit by a double whammy of the data breach, followed by the resignation of Simon Byrne after that court judgment in relation to the handling of the incident on the Ormer Road. To get a perspective on this, I'm joined by the party's 3 representatives on the policing board, Joanne Bunting, Maurice Bradley, and Trevor Clark. And also we're glad to welcome to the stage Johnny Byrne, academic expert in policing, and Chief Superintendent Stephen Murray from the PSNI. So you're all very welcome. Maybe Joanne, I'll start with you, furthest away. Can you just give me a sort of an inside sense of what it was like to be there on the policing board as the sort of double crisis unfolded? There must have been times when you must have had to pinch yourself, both about the data breach and then about what then happened in relation to the court case.
It was a lot, Mark. I think some of us feel like we live there at the minute. Look, the PSNI was in crisis. And we're in the business of trying to instill confidence in the PSNI. We want our communities to support the police. So one thing after another was a very difficult period. It was also massively exacerbated by people who, from the outsides, decided that they knew more than we did, despite the fact that they were not privy to the information that we had, nor to the legal advice that we had, and the restrictions that we had in terms of the actions we could do. So it was a very difficult period. It was a very difficult period for the officers, actually, some of whom are at huge risk in terms of the work that they do. But hopefully now, the bulk of that is under control. Every officer has been triaged in terms of their risk, and hopefully now, we're coming towards the light and out of the darkness.
Trevor Clark, I mean, there has been some criticism of the policing board throughout all of this. Some people saying, why was Simon Byrne given a contract when that court case was still hanging over his head? And then some criticism from some influential figures about the mess that was left in the immediate aftermath of his resignation before you got the interim chief constable appointed. What's your response to all of that?
Well, I suppose in the first instance, the contract come at a time there was no outcome in relation to the court case. We had to allow obviously that opportunity to pan out. The DUP were very quick whenever the outcome in the case came that Simon's position was untenable. And in terms of the other part, I think Joanne has touched on that. There was people who had criticism of the board and how they handled things. It's no secret that those who had been in the inside, the DUP's position was very clear that we needed someone to step up in the interim to fill that vacuum that was being caused by, obviously, the quick departure of the then Chief Constable. But unfortunately, legal advice that we've been receiving prevented us from doing so. And it was only just last week, whenever the Secretary of State made those changes, that we were able to move that forward.
Now, you have John Boucher in place. Are you confident that he's going to be the person to address this kind of crisis of confidence in policing that we have right now?
Well, I mean, there was an open process in terms of candidates putting their names forward. There was a number of candidates put their names into that pool. There was advice taken from HMIC and the HR in terms of who was the most suitable candidate, and John Boucher has been appointed. Am I confident that John can deliver? I think time will tell. We have to give him a fair wind. He's in post now. He is coming with a lot of experience from other forces. So hopefully, and I say respectfully, hopefully he can deliver on what we need to turn this around for policing.
Maurice Bradley, how would you sum up the general mood within unionism and confidence in policing now in the wake of both the data breach and then, of course, the revelations in the court case, or the allegations in the court case in relation to Sinn Féin supposedly having a perceived threat to withdraw from policing, something which, of course, they've denied?
Mark, I think confidence within the community is pretty low in the PSNI at the moment, and that is something that they have to address in the days coming forward. A lack of confidence in the senior management team, even within the PSNI themselves, has manifested itself. I don't think that going forward that they can afford to lose any more confidence in policing from our community. And the two-tier policing, which has been an allegation, which has been bandied about.
What do you mean by two-tier policing?
Well, there is an allegation that the PSNI treat one section of the community more favourably than the other. That's a perception that has to be addressed, and it's something that will build up confidence within the unionist community.
Chief Superintendent Murray, realise you're in the hot seat here, so let's be kind to him. We've seen reports of individual members of staff, for instance, one telling Spotlight just the other day that morale is at rock bottom now in the PSNI. Is that a perception that you would agree with, and how do you go about addressing it?
Well, Mark, thank you. Morale in policing ebbs and flows as time goes on. There's no doubt we're in a very difficult period. It's been acknowledged by our current Chief Constable and also our previous Chief Constable. For me as a local leader, I need to address that by being visible. And we talk about care, listen and act. For me, that's about care and listen and act internally to my officers and staff and doing what I can to address that. The real challenge for us is how that addressing morale meets our budgetary challenges going forward. So for example, when we speak to our staff and officers, they talk about the 7% pay raise that our colleagues in England have enjoyed and not having that, which gives us some difficulties around managing morale. And there's some issues around just our terms and conditions in general, which is outside the gift of our senior executive team to deliver. And we probably need to do some work around that.
Because obviously there's going to be a massive financial implication to the data breach. We've still yet to really get a figure in how it will work its way through. How do you think the PSNI will be able to cope with that? Will it require the Treasury to come in and back you up, given you don't have that many resources right now?
So my understanding is there is an ask for additional support around that. Unfortunately, I'm not in that. Maybe colleagues in the board will be able to answer that more than I will, but I'm not in the service executive team. My understanding is there's an ask for some additional funding to support that work around the outreach.
Johnny Byrne, how would you sum up the challenges that are now facing John Boucher, given what he's inherited?
Thanks, Mark. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, he's interim, so the closing date for the full-time post is on Monday, but you know, a lot of people are assuming that he's there and he may be there for the long term if he's successful candidate. So as interim Chief Constable, I think there's very little he can do in terms of changing some of those big cultural issues internally and externally. Technically, he might only be there for a few weeks. In the long term, I think there's issues around, you know, budgets in terms of recruitment, in terms of potential fines coming down the road, in terms of promoting neighbourhood policing. Externally, there's the issue around building confidence at a local level with the community. But I think there's another question here around, and I think the board are integral to this, is in terms of what do we want the police for? What do we actually need the police for? Is it essentially about 999, blue light, answering calls, or do we want the police to be an integral part of our community, working with us in partnership, problem solving? And unfortunately, given the resources, you can't have both right now.
And there has been a question about John Boucher's appointment, even in the interim, that he's also obviously the senior officer who headed up Operation Canova. Do you see that as a problem?
From the press conference and from the board obviously appointing him, I don't think technically it's a problem. I think the fact that we're talking about it is an issue. I think the fact that people are associating him with the past and with legacy issues may prove difficult if he has to constantly explain those things. But on the upside, it does give him a unique understanding of some of the complexities that exist here in this part of the country.
I assume because you were party to signing off on that interim appointment that you didn't necessarily see the fact that John Boucher was heading up Operation Canova, which is going to report soon, as a problem. You think it's something that he can get around and that the force could get around?
I'm glad you assumed that we didn't see that as an issue, Mark, because some of us did actually see that as an issue, and that concern was expressed. But a significant piece of work's been done in the background. There's assurances now that once he is the author of the report and he's the interim Chief Constable, if there's criticisms in that report, I think it will be someone else within the senior management team will be out front and centre speaking to that report as opposed to John Boucher. And I think that's seen as one of the ways to get around that issue. But ultimately, you can't prevent an individual who is a high-ranking officer applying for a post based on some legacy work that he's been involved in. And for that reason, that we wish John the best in terms of bringing forward his recommendations in the short term, bringing forward the report, and if he applies for the substantive role, then he's entitled to do so as well.
Joanne Bunting, when this all sort of shakes down, is there kind of room for a kind of wider inquiry about how the policing board has handled all of this? Because obviously there have been criticisms not only of its actions within the last few days, but also its actions at the time of the Ormer Road incident and the arrest and de-arrest and so on of the person from the Ormer Road bookies group. That
I think there's no doubt, Mark. You know, there was reference in the judgment to specific actions taken. that certainly some of us on the board were not aware of at the time and considered to be something of an overreach on the board's behalf. But the board has now agreed that there will be an independent review of those relationships and how the board interacts. And hopefully then that'll see us back on the right track. It's important. I mean, we have a dual role, as you'll appreciate, which is one of advocacy for the police, but also one of scrutiny of the police. And it's a difficult balance to strike, but it's important that we do it the right way. And it's important that the boundaries are respected, because everything operational is within the Chief Constable's gift. And so it is not for the board to step into that space. And that's why it's really important in those circumstances that whenever we all have the right to lobby the Chief Constables and to lobby police officers and to ask them for things and to ask them to take action. And sometimes they can, but it's important that they push back. And that's where this became a problem. It's perfectly fine for Sinn Féin and for us and for anybody else who wishes to have a conversation with the senior executive team about how they're conducting an issue. But the problem is, if it's not our space, the police need to say, no, this is operational. It's not your business. We will take on board your concerns. We will evaluate. But they need to push back, and they should have pushed back in these circumstances, to my mind.
Chief Superintendent Murray, in the immediate aftermath of the data breach, there was a lot of talk that people were going to start walking away from the PSNI, from their jobs, or from whether they were in the civilian staff or in the police service. Have you seen any evidence of that?
It's a bit of a mixed bag around how people reacted. Obviously, data breach was significant. It fundamentally influenced people's morale in policing. It was a significant event for so many officers and staff who hid their career from even their neighbours, and all of a sudden they were in the public domain. As a police service, then we had to address some of those risks and ran a threat management process on every single officer who felt they were at risk, and then put mitigation in to support that officer or the staff member around actually feeling secure in their house, and so they didn't have to take that appalling step of having to leave the job. So I think as a police service, we worked really, really quickly to step up mechanisms to actually stop that from happening. Will officers and staff leave? Potentially. It is a significant incident. However, we are doing everything we possibly can to support officers and staff at this time.
Trevor Clark, because there was a perception that in particular Catholic officers might feel increasingly vulnerable after their details were made public as a result of the data breach, that it might hit the numbers of Catholic officers serving within the PSNI, and that there have been calls from some nationalist politicians for a return to the 50-50 recruitment policy. What would you make of that?
Well, I think it was opportunistic in terms of some of those politicians to make that call. The numbers don't indicate that nationalists want to join the police in the numbers that some wish, and that's because the nationalist politicians and other community leaders don't actually support those within those communities to take those roles. So I think if the nationalist politicians would come out and be clear in terms of their support for policing unequivocal, and that those officers would get their support and protection within the communities, that would have happened anyhow. In terms of the data breach, I'm not sure that there's any difference between someone from a nationalist community or a unionist community in terms of that fear. I think the fear was equal right across the board. And maybe picking up on a question that you had asked Stephen, the evidence at the moment is very clear that the numbers are very small in terms of those who's made that decisive decision to leave the force, and it's less than 10.
Less than 10. Oh, that's interesting to know. Johnny Byrne, how realistic do you think this talk about a return to 50-50 recruitment is?
I think it's more soundbite, and it's a response to a problem. Personally, I'm not a fan or supporter of it. I think it's a lazy policy. Now, I think there was a need in terms of jump-starting recruitment within the Catholic Nationalist Republican community into the PSNI, but I think it served its purpose in those first 10 years. But I actually think, and somebody who comes from that background, that there was a trick missed in terms of embedding policing within nationalist communities as a normal occupation and a normal form of employment. So I think that 50-50 only works if wider communities buy into it and actually support it. But also, in terms of the unionist community, I don't actually think it helps the language and the narrative around two-tier policing either, because I think that in itself will alienate unionist people who want to join the police as well. So I think that it works on both sides in terms of, and I just think we have to be very careful about how we talk about policing.
Maurice Bradley, you mentioned two-tier policing earlier on, and of course, in relation to the Ormer Road incident, people felt that the two-tier was working the other way because there'd been a previous incident with loyalists when police had stood off, and then they felt that instead the police had moved in on the group of relatives at the commemoration event on the Ormer Road. So I suppose what I'm getting at is, what is the perception right now on the street of officers of the neighbourhood police teams and local police teams? Has it been affected by this high-level controversy?
I think our neighbourhood policing teams are the most valuable asset we have in policing today, and they've been pulled apart by the current situation within the PSNI itself. There's officers been taken from neighbourhood policing and repositioned all over the place to cover up where there are deficiencies. So it's a major problem, and the perception around the Ormer Road was that the Chief Constable acted too quickly, too hastily, and made the wrong decisions based on the wrong evidence. That has been borne out by the recent court case. So the PSNI have a massive job of rebuilding confidence within the unionist community. You spoke about 50-50 policing. Policing should be about getting the best person for the job at the time, not about what background or race, anything. It should be about employing the best people for the best outcome.
Joanne Bunting, obviously, getting Sinn Féin to fully buy into policing was part of the whole deal back in 2006, 2007, when the DUP returned to power sharing. Now, we've seen this court case in which there's been the assertion from the judge that the police officers, senior police officers, reacted to a perceived sense that Sinn Féin may pull away from policing. Sinn Féin has categorically denied that. Jerry Kelly said, look, I never made any such threat. So you're having to work with them on a daily basis on the policing board. Are you giving them the benefit of the doubt?
No. No. Look, Sinn Féin says what it says, but I think we're all very familiar with how Sinn Féin speaks out of both sides of its mouth, Mark, and it's not a massive leap from what was in Anne Foblacht to the Chief Constable reaching his conclusion. That said, the action that he took is on him. Now, I do want to give credit to Simon Byrne in that for a long time, the issues around the confidence of the unionist community in policing were dismissed. No, that's not an issue. And we all knew it was a massively significant issue in our communities. And it was a significant change for our community to feel like that about the police. So at least Simon, and I will give him credit for this, Simon was the first Chief Constable to acknowledge, yes, there was an issue of confidence in our community and it needed to be addressed. And he was the one who instigated, there's been a series of these they're called real engagement events with kind of these affected groups. And I just want to come back on, you asked Trevor a question about the Catholic community and Catholic recruits. Let's not forget, the position hasn't changed for them in terms of risk. So we have to bear in mind that whenever those people from those backgrounds want to join the police, very often they have to move away from their family. They can't go and visit their brothers and sisters. They can't go and visit their parents because of the areas in which they live. Now, that's not on the police to fix. I think the police have bent over backwards and done as much as they can do to try and recruit from the Catholic community. But they need political leadership to say, no, it is safe and it is fine, and this is a viable career for you. And actually, I think there's an equal problem just within working class communities in general about how they feel about the police. And certainly in our community, there is a feeling that they don't deal, well, certainly this is my view, that they don't necessarily all the time when they're conducting an operation deal with the situation. They assess the community and then determine how they will deal with the issue. And that is where the problem arises.
What do you mean by that? Can you spell that out?
In terms of an operational assessment, I think that they weigh up, okay, what's the biggest threat here, who's the biggest risk, and then they act accordingly against the people who are the least risk. And we've seen that with parades and protests and so on. And that, you see, this is not a recent problem. This has been building and building and building and building. So thankfully now, the PSNI recognise that there are issues of confidence within working class communities, within the CNR community and within our community. And hopefully now, even under John Boucher's tenure, they will continue to address this because it can't be left by the wayside. It is imperative that the community supports the police and the police can police with the community.
Chief Superintendent Murray, do you have anything to say to that sort of perception of police working on the basis of what's the biggest risk here, what's the biggest threat?
So perception is perception. It's very hard for me to change that here on the stage. What I will say as someone who leads in local policing and runs districts and areas, we do consider community impact. However, we consider that in a fair and consistent approach along for how we make decisions. I absolutely get that policing is challenging, and we are there to uphold the law, and that can bring two different communities, can drift them apart or bring them together, but we're the ones that are apolitical in the middle of it and have to make those really difficult decisions. So the perception is there. I get that. I felt it as a district commander when people stopped speaking to me the next day after speaking to me for 5 years, just because something was done at a different level of policing. So for me, it's about getting back to basics of policing as a local and arresting the drink drivers, dealing with domestic incidents and showing really good policing at the local level and how that translates then upwards and encourages people to join policing, because policing is a really good career and people want to do it and people can make a difference because they can arrest bad guys and keep good guys safe.
Trevor Clark revealed there that maybe only 10 officers or civilian staff have left in total, but of course the PSNI is below complement. How important do you think it is that it's actually brought up to the complement?
New decade, new approach indicated there should be 7,500 officers at this stage. There's evidence to the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee that we're going to go to around 6,300, I believe, in the next couple of years. That's fundamentally going to change how policing looks and feels. And particularly if we're looking at some of those where we're moving resource, some of the like to do is neighbourhood policing. I'm not saying that's, but if we're being really honest around it, if I need to sustain a district, it's the 999 calls, emergency calls that where the public need us the most. That is where I'm going to focus my resource. That's not to say the neighbourhood function is not vital in Northern Ireland. It absolutely is. But you need the money and you need the resource to be able to fund that. And that's really difficult decisions that our set team and the board are making around this.
That in itself plays into the morale issues, because people are being asked to do much more with much less, and that leads to stress and all the issues, and people go off and all more pressure. So.
Trevor Clark, when we talk about possible negotiations with the government, it's all about the Windsor Framework and Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol, but one would assume that some kind of financial package would also be part of any return to Stormont. To what extent are you and your colleagues here on the policing board pushing for funding for policing to be part of any package on restoration and devolution?
Well, setting aside the devolution issue, I mean, the party leader and ourselves has made the issue a priority long before we've got to the stage we're at now. We have to remember this, and I mean, actually, Stephen referenced it, new decade, new approach. It was the two governments indicated the number of 7,500. So if the Secretary of State would forget about his niche projects like Casement Park and funding and promising additional funding for that, and actually come with a funding package now for policing, which delivers for all of the community as opposed to one community over the other, I think those things would work.
Is the funding package you're looking for not just in terms of meeting the new decade, new approach promises, but also in terms of maybe funding these extra resource requirements that there are now going to be in terms of compensation after the data breach and so on, which appear to be quite massive?
Well, I don't think there's a figure in terms of the data breach yet, and I would assume, given some of the language coming from Westminster, that there will be support for that. I mean, I think it's unprecedented. It's not something that you can budget for. So I would hope they'll live to that commitment, releasing that. I mean, let's not say that Northern Ireland's a place apart. There has been data breaches in 3 forces, I think, at this point across the rest of the UK. So we're not unique, except our circumstances are different because of the security implications. So we're still part of the UK, and I believe that there's a consequence of that the British government should assist and have made some commitments in terms of that data breach.
Almost out of time. Johnny Byrne, I'll maybe give you a sort of final roundup thought. What will be the main challenges you now think facing the new interim Chief Constable?
I think if you look back at previous Chief Constables from Sir Ronnie Flanagan, there was Hugh Ord, HET, Matt Baggett, Flags, George Hamilton, Loughlin Island, the dry your eyes comment, Simon Byrne, Ormer Road. We never really get to the point where we just talk about performance and effectiveness in terms of are you keeping people safe? And I think, to me, that's where I would like to shift the agenda.
On that note, we have to leave it. So, Joanne Bunting, Johnny Byrne, Maurice Bradley, Stephen Matthews, and Trevor Clark, thank you very much.
Lockhart, and I am the Member of Parliament for Upper Band. I've been elected to the UK Parliament for 4 years. I sit on the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee. I'm also Agriculture and Environment spokesperson, recently appointed as the party's Levelling Up spokesperson, and everyone will know that I take a very keen interest in life issues at Westminster as well. I count it such a privilege and an honour to take the concerns, issues, and things that really matter to people right to the heart of our UK government. The DUP are a pro-life party. We count it our duty and a real honour to stand up for the unborn. The most basic human right is the right to life, and we believe that in every pregnancy, both lives matter. Just 2 years ago, I was appointed as the UK's all-party parliamentary group chair on the pro-life issue. This means that we are able to bring to the floor of the chamber issues that really matter on life, be it beginning of life, end of life. And we're able to seek legislative change that brings about life-affirming laws in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, in Northern Ireland, the UK government did ride roughshod over the devolution settlement and introduced abortion laws in this wee place we call home. The fight's not over. We will continue, be it at Westminster or in the Assembly, to ensure that we stand up for life and that we are a voice for the voiceless.
Conference. It is with great pride today that I stand here as DUP MLA for East Antrim. Ten years ago at university, I interviewed my predecessor, David Hilditch. What I heard surprised me. We shared the same values, ideas, and passions. We had the same love for community and the union. It was in that moment I realised I didn't want to complain from the sidelines anymore. I knew in my heart that I wanted to serve and improve my community. I wanted to be part of making Northern Ireland a better place. I had always been fascinated with how glass and class ceilings could be smashed, not just in politics, but across society. Back then, I was a young single mum, and life was tough, and it was an incredibly lonely place to be. I was told more than once, stay away from politics, but it was not in my DNA. It was in the DUP I felt at home. I knew that the DUP, our great party, could help me achieve my dream of making a difference in the community that I loved. Alongside Sammy Wilson, Gordon Lyons, and our excellent East Antrim team, I pledge to repay the faith that you've put in me, and I will continue to work hard for all those we represent. But Conference, this is only my story. Everyone here is on their own journey. We come from various social and economic backgrounds. Your reasons for believing in the union might even differ from the person sitting right next to you. Some see this diversity as a challenge, a weakness even. However, I see that as our strength, our opportunity. The union is a thread that binds us all together. Unionism is much, much more than a flag. It's a way of life. Conference, only by moving forward together will we succeed in strengthening the union for our children and grandchildren. I know that our party leader shares this outlook. For almost 4 decades, he has demonstrated dedicated public service. He's been a fearless advocate for Northern Ireland and our United Kingdom. And he's shown a steely determination to heal the fractures that have plagued us for too long. It's therefore a privilege to introduce to you our party leader, my friend, and the leader of unionism, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, MP.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests and friends, it is a great joy for me to be introduced by our newest MLA, Cheryl Brownlee. Cheryl represents the very best of our values and ideals as she steps forward into her new role as MLA for East Antrim. We wish her every success in the next chapter of service as she joins our strong team at Stormont. Thank you, Cheryl. Conference, we meet today at a time when we are watching with horror the dreadful scenes that have taken place and are continuing in the Middle East. The merciless murder of innocent men, women, and children by Hamas terrorists in southern Israel, and the maiming and abduction of others brought back vivid memories of similar atrocities during the darkest days of our troubled past. Our hearts go out to all who have suffered loss or who are living with the uncertainty of what will happen to their loved ones being held captive. They can be assured of our prayers at this time. This party stands firmly with Israel. We do so recognizing their right in international law to defend their people from such acts of terrorism. We urge that in rightly seeking to destroy the infrastructure and the terrorist capacity of Hamas for the heinous crimes committed against its people, that Israel will take every care to avoid harming those civilians in Gaza who have deliberately been placed in harm's way by the actions of their so-called terrorist overlords. As William reminded us this morning, we are called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we believe passionately in the biblical exhortation, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." Our own experience in Northern Ireland demonstrates what can be achieved in even the most intractable of conflicts. Yes, security is vital, but it is not the presence of soldiers or the building of bigger military installations that offers true peace and security. It is the absence of violence and the building of consensus that offers the way to that experience of real peace and security. It is our fervent hope and prayer that those engaged in terror and violence will come to see the futility of those acts and embrace the principles of democracy and non-violence, because that's what the peace of Jerusalem will look like. Conference, we've experienced a great series of speeches and panel discussions this morning. And my thanks go to all of our colleagues who have taken part. Our conference affords us the opportunity to meet together and to engage on the important matters of the day, as well as having our good friends and supporters from beyond these shores join with us. And today, I very much want to welcome our friends from Gibraltar and assure them that they hold a very special place in our hearts. A lot has happened politically since we last met. In May, communities across our nation joined together to celebrate the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III. Citizens of all ages and generations came together to celebrate the coronation of the King and Queen and to lift up our voices saying, "God save the King." Locally, we fought the council elections. Over 173,000 people cast their first preference vote for our DUP candidates. And many others transferred their votes to our candidates, ensuring that 122 DUP councillors were elected to serve across our 11 councils. And once again, we established ourselves as the strongest voice of unionism in Northern Ireland. And importantly, we sent a very clear signal to the government that it is the DUP who leads for unionism. And the naysayers and the commentators who once again had written us off were confounded. And the fringe elements who contested the election were in the main rejected by the electorate. But Conference, we do not take our position as the lead party of unionism for granted. And we will continue to work hard to build for the future. And I want, on your behalf, to thank all of our candidates who stood and who day after day knocked the doors on the campaign trail and fought for every vote in that election. We have an incredible array of talent in this party, and we've seen some of it this morning. New faces coming through and elected for the first time, and seasoned campaigners who have earned the trust of their electorate. This blend of youth and experience offers a formidable DUP presence on every single council across Northern Ireland. The election results we achieved were delivered on the basis of a team effort, and were made possible because of the hard work and dedication of all our members across the country who canvassed doors, put up posters, and worked to cover the ground. I salute all of you and thank you all for what has been accomplished. Conference, I also want to pay tribute to our Director of Elections, Gordon Lyons, MLA, for his guiding hand in planning and organising our election campaign and ensuring the return of the same number of candidates as were elected during the previous mandate. Thank you, Gordon. At that election, our mandate was renewed, and every DUP councillor is pledged to seek better services with low rates and to focus on the issues that really matter to ratepayers. But the election wasn't just focused on council issues, and the wider political picture dominated the campaign. We knocked on thousands of doors and spoke to countless people. We sought a mandate to re-establish the Northern Ireland Assembly on a fair and sustainable basis by finishing the job of protecting Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom and its internal market. And why did we receive such a resounding mandate from the Unionist people? It was because people knew what we stood for. We campaigned for what we stood for, and Conference, we stuck by what we stood for. By working together in the most trying and difficult of circumstances, we secured an election result that provides us with the strong foundations from which we continue to deliver for everyone in Northern Ireland. So today I want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of voters who put their faith in the DUP at the local council elections in May. Your support will never be taken for granted. During the last year, the burden of leadership that I carry has been greatly eased as a result of the support and encouragement you have given to me. I deeply appreciate that support shown from every level of the party and from the many thousands of unionists whom I meet and who I know stand shoulder to shoulder on the journey that we are on. It is the honor of my political lifetime to lead this party, and I know that as we face the future, we can do so with confidence, safe in the knowledge that, yes, conference, together we will succeed. And it is in that unity of purpose that drives this party forward. Let's keep that unity and that purpose. Of course, with leadership comes responsibility, and with that responsibility comes days when the challenges will be greater than others. That is why I consider it a great blessing to have Gavin Robinson MP as my new deputy leader. Gavin isn't just the Member of Parliament for East Belfast, but importantly, he's a man of great integrity and wisdom. He is a widely respected parliamentarian who puts in the hard yards and never shirks from any project he is asked to undertake. Respected throughout the party, as well as by many across the House of Commons, he has been a constant source of encouragement and advice to his colleagues. And so I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Gavin for his loyalty and support and for all the work he is doing as Deputy Leader at the present time. Thank you, Gavin. Conference, I also want to place on record my thanks to Paula Bradley, who stepped down as Deputy Leader earlier in the year. Paula is with us today, and I know, Paula, that you continue to serve our party and your constituents on Antrim and Newton Abbey Borough Council. Thank you for your service to our party and the community. It is clear that we are nearing the end of this Parliament. In the next 12 months, or even before it, we will be on the campaign trail at a general election to elect our MPs. As you heard from our parliamentary colleagues on the panel this morning, we will be able to present a strong DUP record of achievement as we campaign for a fresh mandate in that forthcoming election. And I want to thank our members of Parliament for their work, not only in Parliament, but for their constituents and for the party over the last 4 years. To Gavin, Sammy, Gregory, Jim, Ian, Paula and Carla, Paul, sorry. We're not that far down the road. We pay tribute for their work representing Northern Ireland's interest in the House of Commons. Thank you to my parliamentary colleagues. On every occasion, our team has ensured that the issues and concerns of our people were raised and our influence used as a force for good of constituents across Northern Ireland. Particularly during the cost of living crisis, we have been a strong unionist voice speaking up for Northern Ireland at Westminster. And so I also want to pay tribute to the work of the DUP team in the House of Lords, to Morris, Nigel, William, Wallace, William and Peter. Thank you for your contribution to our work in Parliament.
They too are a cohesive and strong voice for us in the upper house and have worked diligently to pursue the government on the flaws of the protocol and the framework, as well as their revising and amending work on the recent legacy bill, which has now been enacted. And as we approach the end of this Parliament, we will continue to use our influence for Northern Ireland and to promote the case for ever greater connectivity across the United Kingdom. We will work to further develop relationships across Parliament with all those who value the Union. Whether the Conservative Party is returned to power after the election or Keir Starmer's Labour Party, we will engage constructively with whoever is Prime Minister in the best interests of Northern Ireland and the whole of the United Kingdom. In addition to our regular engagement with the Secretary of State and his team, I warmly welcome Hilary Benn's appointment as the Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. And we have already engaged with Hilary and will continue to do so. And I look forward to building that fruitful relationship with the Labour Party team as well as with the Northern Ireland office. Conference, I want to put on record my deep appreciation for the work of our Assembly team during the last 12 months. They have ably assisted me in significant preparatory work as we have engaged in discussions with the government and the other parties across a wide range of issues that are important for everyone. Additionally, they have been involved in important policy development work with external stakeholders, representing our party at numerous engagements and meetings, as well as continuing to serve the needs of local constituents throughout the network of offices across each of their constituencies. Conference, their hard work and their sacrifice for this party will not go unnoticed or unrewarded. Thank you to our Assembly team. Mr. Chairman, we meet today at a time when all eyes are upon us. Not for the first time, London, other Northern Ireland parties, and no doubt even those in Dublin, will be straining to hear what is said from our proceedings. More importantly, tens of thousands of unionists across Northern Ireland look to us to provide them with the leadership that they need and a plan that charts a course to securing a stronger Northern Ireland within the Union. We believe in the Union, and we work to promote the benefits of the Union and to secure our position within the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England, bound together in the United Kingdom, is the most successful political union the world has seen, and we want it to remain so. Look at the benefits delivered through our membership of the United Kingdom during the COVID-19 crisis. The wonderful staff in our local NHS who cared for those needing hospitalisation or ongoing support in the community. Delivery of the fastest rollout of the vaccine across all parts of our country. Provision of much needed financial support for our businesses and employees through the furloughing scheme, as well as payments and support for the self-employed, to name but a few. And more recently, we've seen support delivered across a range of cost of living measures, which ensured that the people of Northern Ireland received the same level of support as those in the rest of the United Kingdom, something our parliamentary team worked hard to deliver. Colleagues, I believe in the United Kingdom because I believe it is best placed to improve the lives of all our people, because of the long-term economic strength and the firepower that it brings, because of our National Health Service, and because the UK alone will preserve and protect our way of life. To further strengthen our links, I have asked the government to consider establishing a new East-West Council that will bring together representatives from across the United Kingdom. This would include Northern Ireland, the UK government, and others from across our nation and its regions to meet on a regular basis to discuss and collaborate on opportunities for enhanced cooperation. And frankly, colleagues, I want to see our government stepping up to the mark in making the union work. It's their turn to speak up and speak out and do what is needed to defend and promote the union. I believe that when unionism is united, we are at our strongest. This does not mean that all unionists will agree on every issue, but that we can find commonality in a unity of purpose on the matters that draw us together, where we can unite behind a shared vision and values that are open and welcoming. Wherever I travel in Northern Ireland, I get one consistent message from unionists. They want their unionist elected representatives to work together. They see that a fractured unionism costs seats and costs influence. And I have repeatedly said, and I say it again, that there is more that unites the unionist family than divides us. I've had regular meetings with all the other unionist parties to discuss how we can work together to achieve our objectives. But we must do more. And this party stands ready to play our part in delivering greater unionist cooperation. Too often in recent years, unionism has been on the back foot in the constitutional battle, with a nationalism that is already planning and preparing for the future. Now we must collectively step up in our efforts to promote the union. Those who believe that a united Ireland is around the corner, that it is inevitable, and that Northern Ireland within the Union will cease to exist, are entirely wrong. And conference, this is important. If we make the right choices now, we can secure the union for generations to come. But that means being prepared to face up to new realities and adapting to new circumstances. I welcome the Labour leader Keir Starmer's comments last week that a border poll is not even on the horizon. It is a confirmation of what we already know. However, we must not simply seek to defend Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom. We must be active persuaders for the Union in both word and in deed. Rather than wait until it's too late, now is the time to work to make sure that the conditions for a border poll are never satisfied, because people here can see and experience the benefits of the Union. Whilst the case for leaving the UK is based on economic myths and fantasy politics, our overriding objective must always be to make Northern Ireland work, to deliver prosperity, and to thrive as a valued constituent part of the United Kingdom. Having secured our place in the Union, we can then confidently work to build cooperation with our neighbours in the Republic of Ireland based on mutual respect and shared benefit. In addition to our opposition to the protocol, we fought the last Assembly election on our 5-point plan for Northern Ireland. That plan included building prosperity and stability, which are key to securing the Union in a Northern Ireland that is changing, and where unionism must broaden its appeal if the Union is to be protected and enhanced in the longer term. I've said it throughout the course of my leadership of this party, and I say it again. My unionism is an inclusive, modern, and positive unionism. And I want us to build a better Northern Ireland, not just for those who share our unionism, but for all our people. I want us to build the broadest coalition of pro-union support from right across the community. Unionism should have no barriers to entry beyond a belief that Northern Ireland is best served as being an integral part of the United Kingdom. We want to make Northern Ireland a place of peace and stability and prosperity for all. But to do that, the government first has to act to undo the harm caused by the Northern Ireland Protocol and remedy the delicate political balances so devastatingly upset over the last few years. Mr. Chairman, when I last stood here 12 months ago, the UK government had recommenced talks with the EU on the protocol. On that occasion, I said that for us, the issue of which route is travelled, whether the talks with the EU are successful or whether the protocol bill at Westminster becomes law, is not the dominant question. For us, what is important is the destination reached. It's the outcome. I further indicated that we needed an outcome that ensured our place in the United Kingdom was restored. The outcome of those UK-EU negotiations, the Windsor Framework, whilst undoubtedly representing progress across a number of areas, did not sufficiently deal with some of the fundamental problems at the heart of our current difficulties. And yes, it didn't meet our 7 tests. This party, whilst welcoming progress, took our time to consult the wider public through the establishment of a consultation panel to hear the views of people throughout Northern Ireland. And I want to place on record our appreciation to the panel, led by my predecessors, Peter Robinson and Arlene Foster, and to all those who responded with their views and concerns. Upon careful reflection and consideration of the facts, and not the spin, we concluded that the framework did not meet our 7 tests as set out in our 2022 Assembly Election Manifesto. Our phased withdrawal from the Northern Ireland Executive was designed to highlight to the UK government and to the EU that they needed to address unionist concerns about the protocol, which for far too long had been ignored, and to spotlight the harm it was doing to Northern Ireland's place in the Union. Conference, our view on this has not changed. Despite the misguided analysis of some and the prejudiced commentary from others who have always cheerled for the original protocol, we have remained focused on our aims and objectives, determined to secure further progress at this time. Over the last 2 years, we have shaped and influenced the debate. The DUP confronted the realities, exposed the flaws, and set a new narrative that others have been compelled to accept. Which of the protocol cheerleading parties would now dare to say that they support and accept the original protocol? Yet that was the case that they advanced. Sinn Féin, the SDLP, and even the mighty, rigorous implementers of the Alliance Party, who all got it so badly wrong. Conference, we must never let them forget that their massive misjudgments would have condemned Northern Ireland consumers to higher prices and less choice. And throughout this period, it is this party alone which has led from the front in our determination to replace the protocol. It is when this party acts that change is brought about. And we've been able to lead and challenge because of the democratic mandates given to us by unionist voters in the last 2 Northern Ireland-wide elections. We have a clear mandate to take the necessary political action to resolve the issues that confront us, because we have campaigned to secure arrangements that restore our place in the United Kingdom. And so let me be clear again. New arrangements must be capable of commanding the support of unionists as well as nationalists. The rights of unionists cannot be diminished, sidelined, or treated in a way that is less important than those of nationalists or others. Conference, throughout the debates of the last number of years, we recognised the need to adopt a pragmatic approach to dealing with the customs arrangements for the movement of goods entering the EU from our territory. Unionists rightly and reasonably recognised that were they to pursue the creation of a hard customs border between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, even though that is where the international border remains, it's still there, such a demand would have struck at the heart of the delicate balances that comprise the Belfast Agreement. Yet the same is the case with imposing a border down the Irish Sea and disrupting our UK internal market for British goods. And those who say the protocol was about protecting the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement got it wrong. It didn't protect anything. It harmed and undermined the core principles at the heart of that agreement, and that is unacceptable. And again, let me be clear to this conference. The imposition of a customs border on goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and remaining within the UK internal market was unnecessary and unacceptable when it was brought forward in 2019. And yes, it was unnecessary and unacceptable in 2021 when the protocol was implemented. And conference, we are clear, it is unnecessary and unacceptable now. It is little wonder that those delicate relationships created and mapped out in the Belfast and St Andrews agreements have been so fundamentally damaged by the protocol. Our economic rights as British citizens that were protected under Article 6 of the Acts of Union were recklessly diminished by the Northern Ireland Protocol, as confirmed all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. As the late Lord Trimble said, this undermined the principle of consent and it harmed our place in the Union. And conference, it is our task to repair that damage. And so for our part, Mr. Chairman, those balances will have to be restored and our rights respected and protected in law if we are to build the truly shared future that we desire. Our discussions with the government continue. And today I can report that we are making progress, but there remains more work to do. I am hopeful that the remaining concerns can be addressed as quickly as possible. Our objectives include restoring and future-proofing in law our Article 6 rights under the Acts of Union, thus ensuring our ability to trade freely within the UK internal market and securing further measures that will strengthen Northern Ireland's place within the Union. These are our priorities. And the default route for the goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland should be through the UK's own internal market system. And within that system, goods should move smoothly. It is simply not right that within the United Kingdom, businesses and traders who pose no risk of criminality or smuggling or of disease risk should have their goods subject to physical inspections. But conference, there will come a point when we have to determine if the outcome of the discussions measures up to our objectives and our manifesto commitments, and whether there is a sustainable basis for moving forward. This party has a proven track record of saying yes and leading from the front when it's right to do so. But conference, equally, we will not be afraid to say no if we conclude that what is on offer does not adequately deal with our fundamental concerns and is not in the best long-term interests of our place in the United Kingdom. Conference, this party, and let me be clear, this party will not be bullied or threatened by anyone, whomever they purport to represent. We will take our own counsel and we will take our own decisions as we always have in the past. And as Unionists, we will always act in the best interest of Northern Ireland and never act to undermine the Union. Building peace and stability in Northern Ireland has been a long and often frustrating process. It has required strong leadership to overcome the many challenges. And yet today, we are in a better place for having undertaken that journey. Our young people enjoy a way of life and opportunities that the Troubles generation could only dream of. Yet there is still further to go. The next few years will be difficult and painful as we embark on the next part of our journey, involving a re-examination of our troubled past, a legacy formed of years of misery and suffering, and now one shamefully tainted by the denial of justice to those who lost their loved ones. We were right to oppose the government's legacy bill because we believe that the path to reconciliation is not made easier by the denial of justice. This party will continue to speak up for our courageous men and women who put on the uniform of the Crown to protect us all from the evil of terrorism that stalked our land. And we salute their record of service and their memory. And this party will continue to stand up for all the innocents who have suffered from those long, dark years of terrorism. And conference, this party will continue to stand against any paramilitary terrorist organization that seeks to justify and eulogize their heinous crimes of terror, or to twist the facts of history in a way that presents them as some kind of latter-day freedom fighters. They were no such thing. They denied thousands of our citizens the freedom to live in peace. They denied them the right to life itself. And there is no political cause, whether in Gaza or in Belfast, that justifies the murder, maiming, or abduction of innocent men, women, and children. And conference, our message is very clear, even to others in Northern Ireland. Such violence was never justified, is never justified, and those who suggest otherwise show no shame. This weekend marks exactly 17 years since the St Andrews Agreement was reached, following the multi-party talks in Scotland. In October 2006, Dr. Paisley, Peter Robinson, Nigel Dodds, and many other colleagues worked tirelessly to bring about a fair deal that ushered in a new era, where unionism was center stage, working with others, and where fairness and respect replaced pushover and failure. The agreement and subsequent work cleared the way for the transfer of powers to the Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive in 2007. And that era of stable devolution laid the foundations for further peace and prosperity. It allowed us to change the image of Northern Ireland and to open our doors to the world, attracting new high-tech businesses, many of whom have reinvested again and again. Conference, I still believe in devolved government. This party believes in having locally elected representatives take decisions in the best interests of our people. All our people. But more than that, if we want to make the positive case for the Union, then having local institutions that succeed in delivering for everyone in Northern Ireland is an essential element in building our case for the Union. And we must not allow Republicans to perpetuate the myth that Northern Ireland is a failed and ungovernable political entity. And therefore, in their view, a divisive border poll is required. We can and we must make Northern Ireland work for all its people. To those who argue that direct rule is a better option, I say this. Time and again, Westminster has imposed laws upon us that are not in tune with the needs or the wishes of the people of Northern Ireland. You cannot, on the one hand, repeatedly condemn successive governments for letting us down, and then argue with credibility that we're better off ruled by those very same people who do not really understand what makes this place tick. Such an argument for any unionist to put forward is a nonsense, and it's not one we put forward. After all, the strength of the union is in the way that it accommodates the diversity of its constituent parts. And the peoples who inhabit these islands benefit from that. Northern Ireland is a distinct place with its own sense of identity and values, and yet we want to play our full part in our United Kingdom. Having no say in our future will not be a recipe for success. Our system of government is far from perfect. And when it returns, we must collectively dedicate ourselves to ensuring, even when it is difficult, that decisions are taken that make a real difference to the lives of the people we represent. Conference, I entered public service to make a difference on those everyday issues. Health, education, childcare, housing, and yes, pay for our workers. To name but a few of the issues that are important to all of us. And yet, as I look around, it saddens me to see the state of some of our public services and the burdens placed on many of our people. The Northern Ireland Assembly and Executive will never have all the answers, nor will it be able to fix everything. But we want to tackle these challenges, and with fair and equitable support from the UK government to sustainably invest for our future. It means we must be prepared to build a better future for Northern Ireland within the Union by fixing our health service and investing that extra £1 billion that it needs. It means growing our economy and creating jobs and prosperity over the next 5 years. It means helping our working families by delivering, not just talking about, 30 hours of free childcare per week. It means focusing on the needs of our kids in the classroom to prepare them for the world of work. And Conference, it means we must be prepared to take the necessary steps to build a fair, shared and united community where everyone can feel valued. I want us to be the party of Northern Ireland and the party for Northern Ireland and our place within the United Kingdom. A party for all those who value a strong economy, high-quality public services, opportunity and fairness for all. And a party that can once again restore a sense of stability and confidence to Northern Ireland. A party that has its anchor secured in the mainstream of unionism and on the common ground of Northern Ireland politics, delivering fairly for the many and not just the few. Conference, we do not have the luxury of retreating to the comfort of the fringes of politics. We are ambitious for our country and our people. Men and women across Northern Ireland are depending on us to defend the Union. In their thousands, they know that this party is the first and the last line of defense for their cause, our cause. And I want us to rebuild relationships that have been strained in recent times and to restore a level of confidence across the community. But first, we must ensure that we prevail on the most fundamental of issues, protecting our rightful place in the Union. Then, we must set about restoring the cross-community consensus that is essential for the political institutions to be re-established and for them to sustainably succeed. We have faced many challenges in our 52-year history, but with unity, dedication and determination, I know that as we leave here today, we can chart a course to a new era of prosperity, stability, and an enduring Northern Ireland within the Union. Conference, this party, together, we will succeed. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
Well, that was some performance, and well done, Jeffrey. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference is not over, although this part of it is over. So we'll be moving then from here to elsewhere, and you know what's on. You have your agenda there. But in between that, there will be lunch. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, this might sound like it's over, but it's not. I hope I get that message over, because I suspect I'm not. Could we sing the national anthem, please?